Hey everyone, welcome to HR Summer School 2021. I am so glad to have you here. So glad to have you here as part of the conversation. And I've already seen people chiming in the chat. So let us know where you're connecting from. Go ahead and pop your name in there because this is not the event that you're just a spectator for. This is the event that you are a participant in. And we're so excited to have you here as part of the conversation. I am Ben Eubanks. I'll be hosting you for the next 3 days on this journey, this experience, this opportunity to level up who you are and what you can do as an HR leader. I'm so excited to be here with you and to have the chance to learn alongside you from these amazing speakers and insightful leaders we're going to have along with us. So really quick, a couple of quick announcements and things just to run us through what we have coming up and what to expect. So number one, we have SHRM and HRCI credits for this event, 7.5 credits for you. So we will be sharing that information out about how to get those credits later on in the week. So stay tuned, keep an eye out there, and we'll be sharing that out. In addition, we do a ton of giveaways. We give away a ton of things, resources, books, tools, stuff like that. This year, my goal is to give away about 100 different things. So if you were here last year with us, you saw that as just another fun benefit of being alongside us. So people that share, people that engage here in the chat, people that talk about the experience at the end of the day. Last year, several participants would post kind of a day in the review, a review of the day, I guess. Here's what I learned today. Here's a speaker that I really appreciated. Here's a screenshot from the event. Those kinds of things, share those out, tag HR Summer School in them, and we'll be giving things away. Speaking of giveaways, I actually have one for a couple people just to show you. I'm not kidding about that. We're going to give stuff away already. So Jessica, Crystal, Matthew, and Mildred, you are getting something because the last few days you've been chiming in, sharing, again, promoting the event, things like that. And I appreciate every one of you for that. So just ping Melanie at upstarthr.com. She'll get that for you. Congrats. And the rest of you are, again, in the loop for that. Just keep sharing, keep promoting. We'll do that throughout the week, sharing and giving away things as we go. Quick thank you to our sponsors. We'll be talking more about them and hearing from some of them this week as we go. People Strategy, Fuel 50, Lattice, swag.com, and Checker. Thank you to all of you for helping to make this possible. We appreciate you for making this event free for the HR community and for enabling us to serve the community in a special kind of way. So thank you to each of you as a sponsor for making that possible. If you were here with us last year, you might have heard the story of Chris Fields, but for those of you that don't know him, we're also doing a donation this year in his memory. Last year, Chris has been a member of the HR community for years and was a supporter, very vocal. He was the kind of guy you could sit down with and talk about anything, even if you had never met him before. Just a wonderful man. And he passed away sadly last year, very early on in the year. And so last year we dedicated the event in his memory. We're going to do it again this year. So in honor of Chris, we're going to be giving away a donation to the Chris Fields Memorial Scholarship Fund, and just want to give a hat tip to him. For those of you that don't know him, you can go and dig and learn more about him online. But just to say, he's the kind of guy that all of us should want to be in terms of just being an advocate for other people and selfless and caring and all those good things. So I appreciate Chris for who he was and for what he's done and for his legacy. So let's continue that. All right, one last thing for me. I'm actually going to turn the mic over, which I don't think I did at all last year in this kind of way live. So we actually have two people kind of waiting in the wings here live, ready to jump in. Oh, goodness. So today's agenda, I'm doing some quick announcements, obviously, right now. I'm welcoming every single one of you here, and I'm glad you're here. I'm personally glad that you're here. We're going to have a quick fire starter. I was talking with two of our speakers from last year, Greg Hawkes and George Rogers, and said, would you guys be willing to come back and do something to get everybody pumped up, get them ready and excited for the day? And so they're going to do that both today and tomorrow, each taking a turn, kind of leading the conversation. So I'm excited to have them here with us, and I'll be bringing them on shortly. Elsa is going to talk to us about the question every employer should be asking right now. Very topical, very for us as HR leaders. We're going to take a break, and we're going to actually not just do some giveaways, which we are going to do. We're going to do a quick spotlight. Where are they now? We had I did some short conversations, just a couple of minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, with different attendees from last year. And so each day during that little break, we're going to celebrate and elevate the story of one of those attendees from last year. Today's is Gloria Ortiz. We also have Carla Patton and Judy. I'm forgetting your last name right now, but I love you just the same. And we'll be sharing one of those stories every single day this week, just to give them a kudos and also to point out the kind of community that we're building here around summer school. I'm so honored to celebrate their stories. After that break, we're going to go to Trent to talk about recruiting. We're going to talk to Francisco about behavioral science and how that applies to the things we do. Hint, HR is about modifying behaviors in a lot of cases. And then last, we're going to wrap up with Jane Jackson. She's the CHRO at Wistia, the video company, and we're going to talk about perspectives on DEI and burnout. We'll wrap up with that. So I'm so excited to have all of you here. It's going to be a tremendous conversation. And as I said, I'm going to turn the mic over for a little bit to our good friends, George and Greg, and let them celebrate with you, let them talk with you and share and inspire you, hopefully. So let's bring them on to the conversation. Gentlemen, welcome to HR Summer School.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm so glad to have you both here. I'm actually going to get out of the way and let you guys have some fun. You good to go, Greg? We cannot hear you, Greg. All right.
He's muted. He's muted. Hey, we are
right.
summer school for us right there, Principal Ben.
That's the fun of a live event. Everyone, we're getting all Greg's.
Oh,
there
yeah.
we go. Perfect. All right.
Okay.
Hey,
Shoot.
Greg wanted me to feel better, everybody. Right? He wanted me to feel better because last year, so for those of you that this is your first time, last year, the very first day, I was on and live for like 3 or 4 minutes before I had any clue that my microphone was muted. So I told someone the other day I was going to joke about it, just like my mic was off, and I did not do that.
Sure enough.
There we go. So Greg, George, I'm going to pass that baton to you two gentlemen. You guys have some fun. Get us inspired for the day, and I'll be back.
Oh, it's going to be such a good day.
All right.
Thank you, George. It is so good to be here with you. HR Summer School, our second year. So I'm feeling like a sophomore, feel like I know my way around, feel like I kind of got an understanding of what's going to be happening. Tell me, George, what was something from last year that has stuck with you this year?
I'm so passionate about network. I'm a network junkie. I love meeting new people. One of the things I really loved about school, because doing it virtual, it made the introvert really become an extrovert. You're talking and connecting with strangers like you knew them. And so I am in love with the chat. It's a great way to connect with people from all walks of life around the world. And so just really connecting with a lot of different people who didn't look like me, who didn't speak like me. And it was in such great list. I mean, last year, this time we were struggling, not just with the pandemic, but we were going through so much division with the fight, with racism, the George Floyd thing. And it was such an emotional thing to have new friends in school and not be the shy kid, at the desk that nobody talks about, man. Just being able to connect. And even, for you and I meeting last year, it was just an incredible time. And plus, we had so many incredible, I like to call them teachers. We had teachers in there that were just killing it and really raising the bar each and every day. So that's what really stood out to me. And I'm so excited for all the new faces to see some of the other alumni that we haven't been able to see. It's like summer break's finally here. So I'm excited. What about you?
I am similar to you. I love people for the most part, and I love connecting with people. And again, the idea of the virtual has created an introvert's paradise where they could just engage and not have to deal with humanity, but just have the screen and talk. And so the thing I recall from last year and what I warned people about this year was that there are so many great students, audience members, people in the place that they contribute so much in the chat, literally. And it was like that chat moves so fast. And so there's lots of people already saying, here's where I'm from, what's going on. But what I loved about last year, and what I know is going to happen again this year, is the extraction and the immediate implementation from the good ideas that people are sharing. It's like throughout the course of this year, sitting in so many virtual conferences, what I learned was the speaker is really just a catalyst for everyone in the audience to jump in and go, ooh, you know how that idea can work in my world? Ooh, you know what I think I'm going to do with that? And they start sharing one to another. That I just have found has been so fantastic. So I'm anticipating learning from people who are churning it up in the chat, who are giving wisdom and insights and practical applications. Like Ben has got so many great people kind of lined up to share and talk over these 3 days. And yet I know what they're going to do is they're going to prompt things in people that are listening that will kind of expand what those concepts and ideas are. So I'm looking forward to learning from people. And so I'm hopeful every one of you in the audience will engage in multiple ways. Listen, you can't chat too much. It's not like you can say something and then like, oh, I just said something, I'm going to wait. Keep it rolling, keep it flowing, keep it going, because there are people that will come back and scroll through the chats and read different things. I know that was part of the fun, just going back, because it lives here forever, George. Yeah. It just lives here forever. And so contribute.
And we had millions of people rewatch the videos from last year. Now, I'll tell Ben, he's excited about the number, but I'll be honest, it was probably you and I were watching those over and over. That's right. We were just trying to be school nerds. It was actually us watching from our iPad, our phone, our computer. We were traveling, and so we decided to watch again. No. There was thousands of people, and we appreciate all the support for everybody. If you can do, I'll ask everybody right now, if you can do a favor, if you're watching this live right now, obviously you are, share the like button, like the post, share it, reshare it. I posted as well. I know Principal Ben has it on his. Reshare there, and let's spread the excitement of HR Summer School. Do not keep it to yourself.
Yeah. And also let's connect. George, one of the things that I'll have to do it sometime in here is put in your LinkedIn connection so that everybody's staying connected throughout the year, because that really is one of the benefits. It's like, this is a compressed time of really awesome people, but across the board throughout the year, there's so many great people to be connected with. So, George, I'm looking at your background. I'm seeing helmets, and I'm seeing shoes, and lots of shoes. So tell me about, what's the story behind a shoe up there, or a shoe that you have? Because I like to think I like shoes, but you are a whole nother level of shoe connoisseur. And so just talk to us a little bit about your shoes.
Man, so this is, I'm in my man cave, and this is where I come. Obviously, I got a guitar, piano when I just need to relax and get to myself in a little small office area. But I have a passion. Some people call it an addiction. I call it a passion for shoes. And every shoe has a story. I got some good shoes up here. I got some that are signed. This is not my own. I got tons of shoes everywhere, but I just love shoes, and really, I'll share just, this is one of my favorite shoes because my wife hates it. This shoe is 100% recycled. They call them the trash can hippies, a space hippie, and it's just 100% recycled material. I really love those shoes. It's pretty unique. Another pair of shoes that I really like are these right here. These are Nike Air Force, and if you look at them, you see the shred. When I received this, my wife was going to send it back. These are actually the Nike Black History Month, as you can tell in there, Black History Month shoe, and so that shred is actually a representation of the struggle from a lot of stories. My favorite part of the shoe is the toe. You can actually, it's a reflection. You can actually see yourself, right? So when you look down at your feet, you'll be able to see who you are. So one of my favorite movies was The Lion King, where Simba was looking in the water. It was like, remember who you are. And so I really love the shoe because it reminds me, being adopted, by a white family, I didn't grow up understanding and knowing the history of where I came from. And so that shoe helps me remember that. So those are just a couple of shoes. Then obviously there's, every shoe has a story. I got some basketball family and a couple of shoes that are signed by NBA players and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just a little bit, just the Jordan collection here.
So how have you taken your shoe obsession, not addiction, and how do you translate that to serve people, to like help people? Because this whole year, there's just been a lot of people trying to grow in empathy, trying to have an expression of compassion, and really take in all the different walks of life and all the different ways people walk in their shoes. Like, how do you take kind of that messaging to serve HR professionals and the companies that they're a part of?
Yeah, so this year, last year, I spoke a lot on bring your soul to work and really talked about those things. This year, from a conversation with my 6-year-old, I shared his story last year in HR summer school, and so this year is really about this journey that we've been on in the last year. It's impossible, Greg, for you to walk in my shoes, but I can tell you the short story of what it's like to be in my shoes. And so I'm speaking now with businesses and companies and conferences about in my shoes, and what does that mean, and how does it relate? So I'm taking shoes that I have that have a story, and every pair I can talk about. Some of these shoes behind me you're seeing are half of them are from my brother who was killed in a car accident in 2013, and so they have a story of passion or pain or happiness or joy, and we've all been on a journey. And in the last year, what has been a roller coaster of emotion, highs and lows, fighting depression, fighting how do we survive as a company, as a business? How do we get that morale? How do we create culture virtually? How do we create culture as we're coming back together, and really building that up? And one of the things that I found is that life is the sum of how well we lead others, right? So leadership is about first self-leadership and how we lead ourselves. And so one of the shoes that I talk about, because I love to dance. And Mr. Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra, I got these different moods. I'll listen to music. And one of my favorite pair of shoes is if you see me in a pair of blue suede shoes, you know that George wants to dance. Now, it may take, a little help, motivation, or the right group, but these blue shoes don't look like what they've been through. Now, these have been through you, and I don't ever clean them, but it's been through a journey of about 6 years. But every time I wear these shoes, whether I'm at a conference or a banquet, if I have them on, I just have to dance, Greg. And so those shoes, is a reflection for me of a lot of things. They've been scuffed up and they've been thrown in the trash. I had to pull them back out. But they don't look like what they've been through. And I think that's important from a HR standpoint, from a company standpoint, is that sometimes we as leaders, we as HR, we as business owners, we don't always look like what we've been through. And that goes for our team and our staff as well, is that some of our people on our team, Greg, sometimes they put on the facade, they have the mask and they cover up, and they don't look as good on the outside as they feel on the inside. And sometimes it's vice versa. Sometimes on the inside, they go through so much stuff, but they look good, they look normal, they seem motivated, but on the inside, they're struggling. And it's our duty, our responsibility to really make sure we know not just what they look like, but what's on the inside. What does that mean, and what does it look like?
George, the consensus already in the chat room, which I was thinking as well, but I see I have affirming words in here, is that we need to see you dance. Is that we just need a quick demonstration, some grooving and some moving.
I don't have my blue shoes on.
Bro, take those shoes off. Put your blue shoes on. That's the word on the street right now. If you want to see George dance, you go ahead and say something in it. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you can't talk about being a man who can bust a move and then not do it.
I'll do one of my favorite TV shows. One of my favorite TV shows is Fresh Prince. And so I'll bust out the Carlton. Is that good enough?
That is fantastic.
I'll do this. So when I'm really feeling good, I'll do the Matrix.
Wait a second. What?
I'll go all the way back. But for time's sake, we won't get into that.
Right. Because we don't have enough time to see you lean all the way backwards.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, George, that's such an interesting. I love that you do both the reverse of the things going on inside could be better than what we look like, because I think mostly the narrative in workplaces is people all look really good, but they got stuff happening. That idea of be kind to everyone because you don't know what everybody's going through something, right? Everybody's got something they're dealing with. Even the HR professionals here. I mean, from a year ago, I suspect many of them have a story to tell, as well as all of their employees that have that same story to tell. But you said, which caught me off guard, they could be like doing well inside and yet not look on the outside. I love that idea so much that, like, how do you in the work that you do help maybe extract that goodness? I don't know if because you're part of creating culture of good and those kinds of things. How do you kind of equip and empower some of these leaders to go, hey, there's good stuff in there that you might not be seeing yet? Because, we're all used to kind of the reverse of it. Oh, everybody's hurting. Everybody's got anxiety. Everybody's got worries and fears. I love that idea of, so just give us one or two pointers here, and then we'll get it back over to Ben in a minute. But how are you extracting kind of that goodness that creates that environment people can do that?
I think it all starts right with leadership. We talked a little bit about leadership, but really the focus is, what is your culture? What is the culture in your workplace? Culture is very simple. Culture is how most people feel, believe, and behave most of the time. That's the culture of your company. What is it that Joe Smith and nobody talks to? What does he believe? What does he feel? And how does he behave? That is the culture of your company. It's not what the executive and the C-level people think and believe. It's not the vision that you put and model you got on your wall or a plaque or your website. That's not the culture. The culture is find your least likely person that's going to elevate, be raised up to a new level. Find that George or Greg that just shows up and does the job, and say, hey, what is the culture of our company to you? Because how people feel, believe, and behave most of the time is the culture that's going to lay out. And so what I strive to do, I got another pair of shoes for this one, Greg. What I strive to do is to challenge companies really to create a culture of good and really allow people to bring their soul to work. And it's really about how to create an inspiring, meaningful, and engaging workplace and world. So how can we not only create culture internally, but how does that culture grow outside of the company? How can we take our company outside of the four walls and affect not just our customers, but our community, right? And so a funny story that happened a couple of months ago, me and my wife, we take our 6-year-old, there's a place, he's like his dad, he's a manly girly man, he's tough, but really sensitive, but he's 6 years old, and this is a bad situation. I've learned, don't start what you may have to stop, right? So if you don't want to have to stop it, don't start it. We took him out to Manny and Patty's one day. And so he loves Manny and Patty's. Every other, it's time, Dad, let's go get our feet. And he loves it, not because of the manicure and pedicure. He loves it because they give him 2 cups of ice cream and a Coke, right? He loves that because in my house, no soda. You get juice, water, milk, and maybe if you earn a Coke, it's a diet or a Coke Zero or something like that. But he loves Manny and Patty. So for Mother's Day, I got a little spa, foot spa for my wife for Mother's Day. And Dexter goes to a Christian school, and a couple of weeks after Mother's Day weekend had passed, towards the end of May, his school taught him, the serving. They were talking about serving, and they show this illustration at his school about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. So one day we came home from work, and my wife, and he had the spa with water in it, water everywhere, but water mostly in the spa. And this 6-year-old kid sat us down, Greg, and this was a valuable lesson that we should all learn from our kids, and not just if you have kids of your own, but just kids in general in this world will teach you a valuable lesson. And he sat us down, Greg, and was sharing about serving. And then he had this pair of shoes for me to put on. You know why he put this pair of shoes? Because he washed our feet, and he wanted everybody to see his job that he did. And so this hilarious. Meant so much to me. And the purpose of the story and what I'm getting to is that if we as leaders can really put in servanthood, not just telling people what to do, not just managing systems and leading people, but if we can serve our people, if we can put hands to the plow and really serve our people, and not just serve them, but be transparent. Let people see it.
Oh, that's good.
So that's important, right? So it's great to serve, but are we doing it then for the right reason? Are we serving to be seen? Are we being seen serving, right? It's okay to be seen serving, but it's never just to serve just to be seen. And so it's so important that we serve our people, we serve our team. We have on aprons and not bibs, right? If you got a bib on, you're looking to eat. If you have an apron on, you're doing work. And so we got to be leaders who are serving people, but also being transparent to what we're doing and why we're doing. Why are we serving you? I want to serve you because it's your moment. I want to give to you. I want to empower you because when I'm not around, I want you then to take that. And what does that do, Greg? It creates, back to the beginning, it creates culture.
Yeah. That is so good, George. That is so fantastic. I love that you're out and about kind of spreading that message, letting people have you come in and share those things. And you're doing that in their trainings, leadership gatherings, those kinds of things. And so, throughout the next 3 days as we're here, these are HR pros that are listening, the professionals that are online, they're going to get so many great resources. Like, people just keep saying connect, they're willing to be connected with. And so as people connect with you after the fact, they also have the opportunities. One of the things you do is bring this into companies, right? This messaging that you do.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking forward to you bringing your apron to people's workplaces to create a culture of good that has authenticity of service. So I appreciate that. Now today, George, we have these people. Ben already mentioned them, but we need to wrap up and get back to Ben in just a couple minutes. How will you, I'm going to follow up with one more question. So we have all these great speakers that Ben went through and talked about today. What is your tidbit of information or inspiration for our audience to get the most out of us? We've talked about them chatting. Principal Ben is just the best. George, I don't know how you feel about him, but I'm madly in love with Principal Ben. I got the biggest man crush on him ever. But the idea of he set all these things up just to resource. I mean, he's living out that apron life. He is serving. And his wife, Vice Principal Melanie, who's really, as we know, is running the show. Ben is just the face. He's just the face. Vice Principal Melanie is putting it all together back behind the scenes. So today, how do we want to encourage our people to extract the goodness from all the things they'll hear, and then we'll turn it back over to Principal Ben?
Yeah, I would challenge everybody to really, the most important thing in school that you should be doing right is taking notes. I love taking notes. Whether you're typing them, whether you're writing them. Listen, if you saw me right now, I got a phone, I got an iPad, I got another monitor. I'm excited about today and to be part of this school and really learn from other people. And like you said earlier, sometimes in the comments you'll say something, we're talking here. I can't wait to go back and read some of these comments because other people have probably been saying some things that we haven't seen yet, or it's something off of our conversation. So I'm really, really excited about that and what that brings. And so I would encourage people to take notes, connect, take notes and more notes, and really, just try to connect with people that don't look or think like you, and maybe have maybe they're outside of the box. Maybe they're not even in your field. You're focused on D&I, but maybe they're focused on different things. Connect with those people. How can we together bring this within the company and unify those things?
Excellent point. And I think that's right. We're putting out a lot of, hey, everybody connect with me. But I think also I like the intentionality of saying, hey, you are in a different space than I am. You see the world different than I do. Your past experiences are different than mine. I want to connect with you in a more meaningful way. Now, here's what we know in the next 3 days. People we put in their LinkedIn, everybody's just going to be connecting. So we don't expect greeting messages. It's just let's all connect because we love HR Summer School. We love the people who are here creating it. But after the fact, going in and saying, hey, I'd like to further this relationship a little bit. Let's set up a 10-minute Zoom call. Let's have a brief interaction here that we can really kind of get to know each other better. I found that to be such a great resource over this past year in intentionally connect with people who just see the world entirely different than I do. George, it has been a fantastic morning.
Man, I'm excited.
Let's have our friend Principal Ben come back so we can get on with this amazing day. And we're going to do it again. We're coming back tomorrow.
Back and better than ever tomorrow.
You guys are coming back tomorrow. And based on the feedback right now, number one, Greg's got to do a little dancing tomorrow. And number two, the audience has loved you guys. Thank you both so much. I appreciate you. And George, man crush, back at you, buddy. I appreciate both of you guys for the work you do. I respect you a lot. And thank you for sharing your insights and your encouragement with the audience.
You're welcome.
No problem, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Yep. All right. Goodness gracious. That was incredible. I don't know how else to describe that. George set a new record for the dancing, for virtual applause there in the chat. I'm watching over here, just blowing up, and everyone loved them sharing. And I can't wait for them to come back tomorrow. Vice Principal Melanie, that also owned me pretty much. Appreciate all the work that those guys are doing. So I'm going to get off again. This is not about me hogging the stage today. I'm going to get off and I'm going to actually bring up our next speaker. So have a conversation coming up with you, for you. Have a conversation with Elsa Glorioso. So Elsa was with us last year, and last year, Elsa's background is as an oncology nurse of all things. And so last year she came and to an HR event, yes, and she talked about the importance of looking at people as humans and caring about them on this most basic level, because sometimes we forget about those things in the middle of what was going on last year. So I had her come back this year because I wanted to hear from her. Right? Okay, we're a step beyond that, but we're not completely out of this. What's next? What should we be thinking about? What should be the first thing employers should be thinking about? And so Elsa's going to come and share with us. She's going to talk to us about what those priorities are, and I get to have a fun conversation with her. So I'm so excited to have her here with us. I'll make sure and put her name in the chat if she's not already there. Oh, she is in the chat already. Awesome. So you can say hello to her in chat, ask her questions, tell her you love her, because everybody loves Elsa. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way and bring her on. HR Summer School. I am so excited for this conversation because if you were here last year, you were going to recognize Elsa, and you're going to remember that she was one of the crowd favorites here at the event. And so I am so excited to have her back, because last year we talked about, based on her background in the healthcare field, where we talked about some of the things that were happening in the workplace. We're talking about human work and what it takes to really appreciate and care for your people. And I'm excited to have her back, because we're going to take that. Last year it was kind of we're in the soup, what are we going to do? And this year we're going to take a little more of a hopeful look at the future and what's coming, and she's going to give you some insights into what she sees based on talking to employers, again, across the spectrum, different industries, things like that. That is part of her job now. She gets to do that. And so Elsa, I'm so glad to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you, Ben. I'm so excited to be back. I'm so excited to, have another conversation with you, and HR Summer School. Here we go, 2021. Hopefully we're right at the end of this. I'm hopeful, and I feel like we are. I really do feel like we are. So hopefully this is, now that we're out of this, what do we do now?
Before we get into the fun stuff, for those people that did not get the benefit of seeing you last year and getting to know you, and again, strange as it is, I feel like we're part of the family, which is fun because you got all the family pictures behind you, but I feel like we're part of the family now. But for those people that didn't get to meet you, talk a little about who you are and what you do so they can get that grounding, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so my name is Elsa Glorioso. I'm with People Strategy. I'm now the Vice President of Insurance Services. So weird how I fell into this. I'm actually a former oncology nurse, and through a patient, I fell into employee benefits. And I've been doing it for about 7 years now. And I really think because I got to see insurance on the clinical side, my approach on the business side is much different, comes, I guess, much more from a place of empathy and really putting insurance to work when you need it. Everybody has to have insurance, just like you have to have car insurance. You're not hoping you get into a car accident, but if you do, you'll be covered. So same thing.
So you alluded to this at the beginning. I want to dive into it because I think it's a conversation on everybody's mind right now is, okay, we are seeing signs, we are getting all these signals that some of the changes wrought and put on us by the last year are starting to come to an end. Some of those restrictions, some of those requirements, and some of the ways we've limited ourselves. And so talk about that from what you're hearing, what you're seeing, your perspective there. Because I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that. Again, partially because of your background in the healthcare space, you can not just see the medical piece of that, but also there's a big part of the mindset that just changes when suddenly collective let out your breath. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, as we're coming out of this COVID pandemic and crazy times, my husband and I always talked about how we would have nothing exciting to share with our kids about our life and what we lived. And then its life was like, well, joke's on you, you're going to survive a pandemic. Just, I'd say from a personal standpoint, from a professional standpoint, companies are concerned. There is a huge concern about retaining talent and retaining their workforce. This was a brutal reminder of what's important in life. It really comes down to the immediate things closest to you. So the number one thing is your family, your home, security of having a roof over your head, and just really back to the basics, back to what matters the most. I think there was even a point pre-pandemic where we were all lost in our cell phones or electronics even. I'll speak for myself. My husband's in social media, and so he tells me all the time, this is my job. I have to be on my phone. Now with the pandemic, we had to get creative, right? Pulled out the board games that, man, I think I caused my kids more allergies than anything else because the dust that was on them. But just really focusing on the things that matter as a working mom. My kids didn't realize there was a pandemic going on. They were just like, this is the best. We don't have to go to daycare. We get to stay home with you every day. And it just really started resonating with me. Man, it's so, we tend to make life so complicated sometimes, and it's so simple. It really is so simple when you think about it and when you're, faced with things like this. And so I think that sentiment is echoed across the board. And folks are really starting to get concerned of, does this mean I have to go back to an office? Does this mean, even though you see the background that I have kids and a family and like all this stuff, did you forget about that? Am I now back to this 9-to-5 person who you thought I was? And you knew I had a family, but you never really knew. Now you've seen my kids like in the background. You've heard my husband on another call. And also the way you performed as an employer. I said it last year. This is your time to shine as an employer and stand out. And either you did or you didn't. And if you didn't, you got big concerns.
I talked to, I was telling you before we started recording, actually, I talked to our research council last week who heads of HR, heads of talent for these large companies. And one of the things that several of them brought up, and when one person said it, they're all doing the Zoom nod, is they're worried about when things return, when there's some sort of demand or push to come back to the workplace, they're going to see this mass of people that are going to say, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to find somewhere else. And so everybody's trying to figure out, okay, do we do a hybrid? Do we do something around, how do we, as you were putting it, how do we recognize and appreciate the fact that maybe they actually have liked this time with their family, they've appreciated that flexibility, they've appreciated some of the change, the dynamic nature of work we've given them. Yet at the same time, how do we get what we need as an employer? If we think they need to be in the office, if we think that's the most important thing, and again, the data are muddy on whether that's true or not. Some people have been in the news lately claiming like everybody's going to be back here and that's just the way it is. But actually the data show in the last year, and for, again, the companies talking to, productivity has actually been higher in some cases when people are able to be more flexible. There are trade-offs, and I completely understand and agree with that, right? Those times, it's great to be with our kids, but there are some times where you're like, man, they just be quiet, I'm on this call and it's important. And there's different kinds of stress here involved in that. But that's one of the things, I'm totally with you on that. And that's the conversation I'm having with employers not every day, at least every week, about what does this mean as we start shifting in some direction, whether it's just this is now becoming normal and we're gonna hold on to this model we've had, or something else around how we put people in the office or don't. That is a big question, and people are trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of the queries I'm seeing on that are what's the best letter template for us to tell people what's going to happen, instead of how do we find out what they need and make sure we're giving that to them.
Yeah. And I wish I could say, I even say this in our management meetings here internally at People Strategy, I always preach to management, get to know your staff, but really get to know them, not just the one-on-one check-ins where they're more concerned of, are you checking on my productivity than are you checking if my kid's doing okay because I told you last week they were getting their MMR vaccine? Did you remember those tiny details? Did you remember that my mom is like suffering a terminal condition and possibly going to pass away like any day now? I think if you do that and you're good about that and you're consistent about that, you shouldn't be worried about preparing some formal template on what life is coming back to work. And if you are, and I try to put my HR hat on, and I understand that we have to follow, rules and everybody has to have a uniform message, but it shouldn't be that difficult to figure out where your employee's mind lies. If they're still concerned, I know a lot of people that they're either immunocompromised or they have a condition. Yeah, the vaccine was great, but they're still really scared and they have a right. That's a valid feeling to have. And so I think you need to, I think I've even thought as far as, I think the Disabilities Act at some what happened here? Because if you're mentally not okay and prepared to go back to work, I can't run a culture or get blood serum to diagnose that. But I should acknowledge that as your employer, and I should validate that and understand that your fears are valid, your concerns are valid. How do you propose going back to the office? It shouldn't be like all right, Monday, June 7th, everybody is at the office at 9 a.m. and that's it. It should be a flexible thing, just like we did with our kids. The schools started reopening slowly. I know my daughter went back for 2 days. Then they eased up a little bit more and said, let's do 3 days. And same thing. It should really be the same thing, because people's life outside of work has not changed. And if it did, then we even need to show further grace, right? If their life outside of work changed. So I think just easing into it, really evaluating. We partner with a company named Peanut Butter, and they actually had a LinkedIn post where they had a company who they did a survey and they said, we don't want to go back to the office. We just don't. So they let their lease expire. And you know what they did, Ben, with that lease money? They put it back into paying back student loans. That's really thinking ahead. Like, where you're thinking we're going to save money on rent, utilities, whatever else we have here at the office. How do we give back to our employees? And they gave back with student loans. And I was just like, wow, that's really differentiating yourself from the pack.
That was one of the other things that I actually heard recently, and it ties in well with that, is in a world where, let's say that people don't go back, it becomes the norm to be able to work remotely for the jobs that allow that. Obviously, some jobs don't, but for those jobs that allow that, that'll become the norm. Well, the fear for employers is, well, then it's just becomes a commodity, right? If I pay you an extra $1 an hour, then I'll be the one that you want to work with versus the other one over there. If you're working from home, there's not another dynamic. And things like that, that's an example of how they care, how they're putting that into practice, how they're supporting their people. I'm willing to bet, whoever that company is, that this wasn't an isolated, let's just give some money to people and then hopefully they'll like us and want to stick around. But I have a belief there that that's probably an extension of the culture of appreciation they have throughout the company already. And again, make some guesses there, but usually when I see a company that's doing things like that is forward thinking, as you mentioned, they're more likely to be looking for different ways to stand out and connect with their people and to be different than everybody else. Oh, hey, they said you can work from home. Okay, great. So a company recently that did something similar is, hey, we let our lease lapse, and then we're giving every single employee a gift card so that they can go and get all the things they need to be able to have their own setup at their house. Right. So we're not just going to say, hey, you can work from home, but we're also going to fund that with some of the savings we're getting on a monthly basis from having to pay this thing we thought would be a permanent part of our business operations costs. So lots of fun ways to not just say, okay, we're going to save on that. Great, we're going to pad the bottom line, but we're also going to use this to stand out from all the other companies that are also doing this, so that you want to stay here and so that you'll tell your friends, right? So they'll want to come here too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Obviously, the nurse in me is, hey, I'm all for the ergonomic setup, the desk where you can stand up and everybody's not sitting all day. And absolutely take some of those savings and reinvest them in your folks. I'm a firm believer that as much as people want to think that everybody wants to work for the big company names, everybody wants to work for the top in whatever industry they're in, It's not really true. People work for people. I do my job and I do my job well because I want to see my manager succeed, because I know he's invested in me. And so I want to return the favor. And that really is what makes any company successful. When you have a group of folks that are really invested in watching the team collectively succeed, the company collectively succeed. And that all comes from finding joy in where you work. And again, going back to what did you call it? The great resignation point. It's true. People are now more than ever, they're like, you know what? I survived a pandemic, man. That's a big deal. That's a huge
job change is nothing, right?
A job change, uncertainty, fear, got through it, and I survived. I did it. So I can do this. And as a working mom, a lot of moms out there, there's a huge decline in the women that are staying in the workforce through this. Because I will say, as much as my husband wanted to and tried to help out, there is nothing like mommy. It's like that one, I almost feel like it's a chip they put in kids, that it's just like the one word you will always have to say is, and the one person, and I will tell you, my husband was sitting right here, next to me, and the kids were just like, mommy, can I have a popsicle? Mommy, can I have applesauce? And I'm just like, your dad's right there, man. Like, really? I'm the only human sitting here.
Oh.
And so moms are just like, I don't know if it's worth it for me to go back to the office and take away from spending time with my kids or the commute. I live in Northern Virginia. Traffic on 66 or 495. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with an hour-long commute back and forth to the office and then have to put my kid in 7 o'clock karate classes, because if not, there's no way I can make it work. It's crazy. It's not good for my schedule, and it's just not a good look for my kids either to be at Taekwondo at 7 o'clock at night when they should be like getting ready for bed. But I will say these are all things that are coming to the forefront of people's minds. I think a lot of couples have really been forced to look at their bottom line too and just say, is this even worth it? How much are we going to spend in daycare? How much are we going to spend, again, depending where you live, you could be paying more in daycare sometimes than you can in a mortgage. So showing, again, grace, showing some kindness and just understanding all these things. And just as an employer, like just being genuine about it. Don't just say, oh yeah, I get it, you have to pick up your kids from school. No, I shouldn't feel guilty having to tell you I need to get my kids from daycare at this time. And if I feel guilty or if I feel a sense of concern, I really have to think about, am I like working with the right people or am I at the right place?
I don't know if I told this story last year or not, but when we found out that our twins, the day they were going to be born, I called my boss, like, hey, they're here, we're heading to the hospital, and I'll be off. I'm going to take this week for sure, and then maybe a little bit of time in the coming weeks. So you need a whole week, was her response to me. I'm like, there are two of these babies, they're twins. I'm like, oh, what kind of answer is that? And that's why I decided to leave there. When they made me feel like I had to make a choice between my family and the work that I was doing. And so I'm glad you talked through a couple of those things, right? Got the working moms thing, hats off to all of you. I appreciate you. And whether your employer does, all of us appreciate you in the HR community, but also the human piece of this, as we're coming kind of to the end here, the human piece of this, that's what last year, the things you shared, Elsa, that resonated with me most, where you encouraged us to look at people as people. And that seems so basic, so elementary. And yet, for the first time, a lot of companies had to do that. As you said, it was, hey, you're here, we're paying for your skills, and we want you to show up at this time and be in this place. And for a lot of people, it should have shifted to, how are you? Are you okay? Do you need something beyond just the task that you're doing for work? Do you need something else to make sure you're okay and your family's taken care of? And those conversations for a lot of employees have never happened in the past. And so that's something I hope sticks around. I don't know if it will, but I'm hoping it sticks around as we see people for who they are holistically, not just, again, I would put it like coldly calculating, you're a bundle of skills we're paying money for. Don't just see those people as that, because then you're missing out on the chance to really engage their best, to really encourage them to bring their creativity to work and all those kind of things. Honestly, my wife will tell you, when she became a mom, she changed how she worked. And she said, I'm way better at my job than I was before that. And that's her words, but she said, I learned how to make the right priorities. I didn't just say, okay, everything can be a priority. No, I picked the right things. I spend the time on those things that matter most. And the students benefited from that when she was a teacher. And again, she's had the chance in the last year to really sharpen those skills up all over again on a couple of different levels. Yes, we could go, I feel like we could go on all day with this, Elsa, but I need to be respectful of your time and for the audience as well. So if someone has connected with you or has been excited to hear from you again, or for the first time today, they want to connect with you or learn more about what you are doing and the people strategy team are doing, what's the best way for them to connect with you or with the company?
So I'd say the best way is definitely check out our website. It's www.peoplestrategy.com. If you go under the leadership section, you'll find my name, Elsa Glorioso. It has my email, my LinkedIn. And yes, it's Elsa like Frozen. That is my real name that I was born with. I did not change it 5 years ago. And Glorioso is, if you want to email me, it's Elsa.Glorioso. It's GLORIOSO at peoplestrategy.com.
Awesome. Yes, I actually told my daughter today that I was talking to Elsa, and she was over the moon, not having any clue who the real Elsa is. But hey, we'll take it. We'll take it.
That's right.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me, for encouraging not just me, but all the employers listening in, every single HR person that's within the sound of your voice, to be more human, to think about what their people need, to help encourage their own leadership, to think about those things. I think it's a critical point. We've got a decision to make coming forward. And I'm so thankful that you're encouraging employers to stop and think about it from that human lens. I appreciate you, Elsa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Bye, Ben.
All right, goodness. I told you everybody loves Elsa, and now you know why. Right? She's speaking truth. She's bringing some great insights, and she's talking to all of us out there about the importance of balancing the family that many of us have. Even if you are solo, you still have some personal needs, and how to balance those with what the employer is demanding of you. And it's such a great set of insights from her. I appreciate Elsa and the People Strategy team for helping to make HR Summer School possible. Love you, Elsa. You're tremendous. And I have to make sure and tell my youngest, my 4-year-old, that I got to talk to Elsa again today. All of you out there, just tell your kid, it'll blow them up. So next up, we get to hear from Carrie Maselli. And I already seen Carrie is in the chat today, already chiming in and speaking up. So I'm excited to hear from Carrie Maselli because she's going to talk to us about the importance of curiosity. She's going to talk to us about asking questions. She's going to talk to us about how to be a better professional. So one of the things I didn't talk about at the very beginning today, by the way, someone said they were in their summer school shirt. So am I, HR Summer School representing. One of the things I didn't tell you at the very beginning is the vision I have for summer school this year. Last year, it was just let's inspire you in the middle of a really tough time for everybody. This year, I'm hoping not just to do that, but also to help level you up as a professional, as a leader, as a practitioner in the HR space. So we have some things on HR and talent related content, but I have a lot of things as well that are going to inspire us to think bigger, to think broader, and to think more strategically as leaders. So this is one example of that coming right up. Let's hear from Carrie on how to think and be curious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another conversation here at HR Summer School. I have been looking forward to this discussion. My goodness. If you haven't heard me talk about in my book, one of the topics in there is around the human skills of work. And one of the things that we're all worried about, the AI, the algorithms, and all the technologies, but one of the things they can't do is be curious and ask questions and want to know more, right? They've marked down a path and they stop when their parameters are reached, and that's it. And humans are different. Thank goodness for that. But one of the things that's been a problem is we don't always focus on curiosity and build that muscle and strengthen that and use that because we are worried about the perception of asking questions everywhere else. So I'm so glad that Carrie Maselli is here with us from Instrument Group. Carrie has a tremendous background and goodness, everything you can imagine, it feels like, right, Carrie? And I'm so excited to have you here to dive into this discussion with me. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's going to be great. I'm so excited. So before we dive into some of the fun stuff around curiosity and how that works and some of your experiences in that area, tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you. I am a director at Instrument Group. So my focus is in the learning and development space. We as a firm are focused on our saying is inspiration to transformation. So we have a whole division that focuses on tech transformations. And then our L&D side either partners with those tech implementations to help the user adopt the new technology, or, and actually more frequently, we do custom curriculum based on what an organization will need to develop their people. So it really runs the gamut and is a ton of fun.
That is fun. And I remember our first conversation we ever had that you're like, hey, I was over here doing this thing, and someone said, hey, you'd be good for learning, and they just like drug you into it, and you realized that you loved it, but it was probably an abrupt transition in the moment. And so to use that to kind of ease us over into this conversation around curiosity, I don't want to put any words in your mouth. I would imagine kind of asking a lot of questions and things helped you transition into that new kind of field. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, it sure did. I mean, I think so. Most of my background, for anybody who's interested and even wanting and inspired to make a career change, I spent the majority of my career so far been in sales and sales leadership. And so that's where I will say, and we can talk about that too, where my curiosity skills were really honed, because you can't walk into any, potential client environment and assume you know something. You have to ask questions.
No finger wagging, right? Lots of questions.
Exactly. Like, I know just what you need. So, it's really, those years of really honing that, and then becoming a sales leader. And then you're right. I was approached by the CEO of an organization I was working with, and there was an opening for the director of learning and development. And he called me on my cell, which was crazy, and said, will you consider this role? And I was really knocked sideways. I knew the position was open. I hadn't thought about it. And then you're right. When I started really turning inward and thinking about this opportunity, and I'm a big believer in things, come to us, and we need to take risks and go for it and follow our heart. And I couldn't stop thinking about it after I talked with him. And I know enough about myself that when I can't stop thinking about something, I've got to go for it. So that's what we did. And I had a lot to learn. I was in sales. And so learning development's a very different space, but also very similar. So asking those questions and really leaning on experts and people who I knew could do things better than me, to deliver for the employees was a ride. I loved it.
That's a ton of fun. And before I want to ask you about some specifics on curiosity, right? We're leaning towards that. And I've been teasing it for a little bit. But for anybody listening into this, I am betting, because I hear it all the time, like, hey, I fell into HR, I fell into learning, I fell into recruiting. And so that falling into it, if you fell into it from somewhere else, or you didn't realize this is what you wanted to do, and now you're in it and you love it, tell us, go ahead and post in the comments what you came from, because it's always fun to see this wide diversity of people. And hey, one of my good friends used to work for an HR manager who formerly was a chemical engineer, and you're like, I've seen it all now, right? We come from everywhere. So that's always fun to see. And so, okay, I wanted to take that little side because I always get excited about that. Carrie, let's talk about types of curiosity, ways we can apply that, because it's a great, I should be more curious. Just like I should be more caring, I should be a greater leader. But those are so big and hard to wrap your arms around. It's like, okay, what do I actually do? So any tips or insights on things we can do to be more curious and to get better results?
I appreciate that question so much, Ben. And I think, breaking it down for me into 3 areas where we can really challenge our own behaviors around curiosity and really just take little baby steps even to being more curious, I think is helpful. So the first one I think about is personally. In my personal relationships, how can I be more curious? I think what it does ultimately is allow us to not make assumptions right away. If we're approached by somebody or we witness something that we are triggered by or that we have some sort of reaction to, it's that pause and saying, okay, what do I know about this situation? What don't I know? I think is always the key, because we assume we know something. And then it's asking questions of people. I just saw this really incredible quote the other day, and I'm not going to share it because I don't know it by heart and who said it, but it was about this idea. What'd you say?
Paraphrase.
Yeah, exactly. It's not mine, full disclosure, but it's this idea that, if we, by judging someone's decision, we don't know the life that they led up until that point in that decision, point. And so we probably would have made the same one had we started in the same place. So this idea that we can learn from each other and really understand another's perspective by asking. And frankly, I love tell me more. Sometimes we don't know what to ask. And so often I'll just pause, and I use this with my kids. I use it with anytime I either am self-conscious and don't know what to ask next, or just really want to understand more. It's tell me more about that. And then you're letting the other person share whatever it is that they want to share, and then you're just building that awareness then, I think, and fostering connection. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, the more we can connect and understand where someone's coming from, the stronger the relationship is.
I was laughing with you about this before we started recording, about how my wife is one of her regrets in life is that I'm a fixer. And so she'll bring me something that she just wants to talk about and wants to just talk about it and kind of think through it herself. And I instantly jump to, oh, but what about this? Or here's an action, or here's a solution for that. She doesn't want a solution. She just wants someone to listen to that. And so I wrote this down right here, like, tell me more. Just stop. Tell me more about that. How do you feel? Right? What's the impact there? Tell me more about that, because I think that'll be my natural break point to say, don't try to fix this time. Let's wait. And it might be that she says, do want your input on this, but sometimes it's just, I just wanted to tell you that's how I felt. And those, again, that's a personal conversation. Guess what? Those conversations happen at work every day too.
They sure do. And I'll tell you, I feel compelled to say that you're not alone in that scenario, because I feel like every partnership that exists has that dynamic on some level, right? I mean, it just, that's how we are. We're wired. Some of us are wired to go right into solution mode, and others, want to listen and actually want to be heard, really is the idea. That second level, I think, so we can transition, really just giving people this idea of how we can baby step curiosity. The next level is professionally. And I would say that it's all the things we do personally, right? Like showing an interest, asking, tell me more, but then really making an effort at work to seek out feedback, to understand someone else's role. I mean, think about, and even if it's not structurally, throughout the organization, you could reach out to, if you're in sales and someone's in operations, or HR and another department that really, HR works with everyone really closely. So reaching out and connecting with people over coffee or even Zoom coffee, right, at this point, and tell me more about your role. Tell me about your challenges. What do you wish was different? It's just amazing where those conversations can go, and how then, how much more connected people feel. And it's really special, I think, when we take the time to get to know somebody on a deeper level.
I want to ask you a question, but I want to let you get to your third piece before I ask it, because there's something that I want to kick around with you a little bit, because I feel like we have an aversion to this at some level. Like, I don't want to ask questions or be seen as someone who just doesn't know what's going on, and so we fill that part of our brain that says, hey, you could ask about this. And I don't know why we do that, but I want you to talk about the third piece of this before we get to that part of the conversation, because I think there are, that might be the first thing that I'll kick back like devil's advocate, right? Yeah, this is a great idea, but I want to be seen as the person that's asking questions. So what's your third piece on this? So I'm loving the professional piece, right? Personal piece, professional piece. Mm-hmm. What is the third one?
Yeah, it's cultural, it's organizational, right? And it's cultural. And I think this is where a lot of our HR professionals today will connect with this, because there are things you can do from a cultural standpoint that really affect and can make a difference and make an impact on the way your employees feel working for the organization and behave. To your point about, this idea that I don't want to be seen as the person who's either speaking up or asking questions, there has to be that culture of psychological safety. Now that one I can quote, that's Amy Edmondson. We all know who that is over at Harvard Business School. There's lots of resources on YouTube. She talks about the idea of psychological safety and this notion that people are free. They're free to take risks. They're free to ask questions and be candid without retribution. And so, do you have that culture? Ask yourself, those of us who are here today, ask yourself, is that something that exists within the culture of your organization? Can people speak up and take risks without ramification? And then, look at and examine, I think where there's real value is, well, that's tremendous, right? If you can achieve that type of culture. But then we often operate in silos. We're head down, let me do my job, let me get my work done. And all of a sudden, we're faced with a situation or a decision in our department, let's say, that we don't understand the up and the downstream to our department and how my decision might impact or affect others. And so when we start to ask questions and reach out and say, I'm thinking of this, what might we do? How might this affect you in either a really great way or negatively? Talk to me about this. And then people feel like they're heard, and can share what they feel. And I think efficiencies are created. People make better decisions because they're not just thinking of themselves or their department, they're thinking holistically. The sky's the limit, I think. And I hate to sound so optimistic and like, oh, pie in the sky, but I just think these connections, just all good things come from that.
Yeah. When you mentioned the culture piece, I thought that was your third one. I want to make sure that was the right one.
Yeah.
I could not recall. The third one is the culture piece. And the first thing I thought of was years ago, I had an employee. We had, of all things, I recruited instructor pilots for Black Hawk helicopters, which was difficult and very fun, right? To have the conversations. They had the best stories. But one of the times I was talking to one of the instructor pilots, and he told me the culture piece reminded me of this. He said, the other day I took up this pilot who was, I believe, Jordanian. And so his religion was Muslim. And he said, this man, we get in there, we do some of our pre-flight stuff, we're flying around. He said, okay, we're going to simulate an engine failure. What are you going to do? He reaches and shuts the engine off as the instructor and takes his hands off. What's he going to do? My heart's beating faster just listening to this story. And immediately, this student who's been instructing, who's been teaching all the operations of the aircraft, he reaches down and starts untying his boots. And he's like, what in the world's going on? And finally, he turns it back on and takes the stick and gets him down and starts tearing the guy up. Like, what are you doing? Like, here's the steps to the process. And the guy's like, no. If I'm going to die, I can't be wearing shoes because that's my like cultural. I will not go to heaven. And he said, I had no clue. Like, I'm thinking operationally, efficiency, like here's the steps and the process. And he said, there's a culture element to everything. And sometimes we forget that stuff. And again, HR is best at being aware of those things and understanding that stuff. But that story always comes back to me when I hear someone talking about being curious about someone else's culture, because even when you think you know, you don't always know until you experience some of those kinds of things and you get shocked by it. In that case, the person wasn't mad at him or upset at him. It became okay, lesson learned. And then his funny ending to the conversation was, I now understand this and I appreciate that perspective. But if I'm in there with you, we're not going to die. So here's what you're going to do next time. Here's how you're going to get it back going. But it was just taking a moment to ask questions before you assume something that's the thing that sticks out to me. So,
that's really powerful. I can imagine. And I want to also, you mentioned this idea about not being comfortable asking questions.
Yes.
And I have my own opinion, right? This is truly what it is. And I think when I think about, there's a level of emotional intelligence we need, isn't there, to be able to step outside of ourselves for a moment and say, okay, I don't know as much as I need to know about this, or what I'd like to know about this certain situation, or I feel uncomfortable about this idea that somebody is pushing forward, or I can see down the road that there's a ramification or an impact that we're not going to want, as a person or as an organization. And so I think two levels, right? One, it goes back to the can I be candid and not be punished on some level. But also, is my ego the one driving this? Right? When it comes to, if from a learning perspective, if we just have more to learn, and we all do, there's not a single person we know who can't learn something from someone. And so asking yourself, pausing, for everyone who's listening, pausing and saying, is this my ego saying, that I'm uncomfortable admitting that I don't know something? If that's the case, I would say challenge yourself to step out of that and think, what's for the good of the situation, in the moment. And if there's somebody who can do something better, in fact, I would argue you're a better leader when you step aside and let somebody else, do what they're great at.
Yeah, absolutely. But I talked to a young man this weekend. It was so much fun because he's a new leader in an organization. He's like on the manager track, and he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. And this is like, gives him a purpose. And he's so excited about it. And so he has the opportunity right now to be cycling around talking to different leaders in the positions he wants to ultimately be in. And he's like, I don't know, like they seem like they're way up here and I'm way down here and I don't know how to get there. And I said, just ask them, what does the best person do in this role? The best person you've ever seen in this role, what do they do differently from everybody else? And every one of them will tell you something different, likely. And if they all tell you the same thing, that makes it really easy to know what skill to build or what focus to have. To tell you different things, start taking notes on all of those. And that gives you a prioritized list of skills to build in yourself as you're getting ready for this. But it was so much fun because he's like, I have a chance to ask questions. I wasn't even sure what to ask. And so I'm glad you talked about that piece of it, because he's so excited now to have kind of a roadmap for how to do this. And again, it's just a bright future. I'm excited for him, proud of him, all those fun things. And I think all of us can take a little bit of that excitement into our role right now. Even if you're in a job you love, you're happy with, like Perry said a minute ago, for those of you listening into this, take a minute, right? Go ask someone else in the company a little more about what they do. Tell me more about that. How does that work? How do you make those decisions? Right? Not with I'm here to correct and punish, as HR is often seen, right? Learning's here because they're gonna fix us. No, it's just, I want to understand more about it so that I can serve you better. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take care of and serve and facilitate things in the business. And the better you understand that, as one of our other speakers has said at the event, the better you understand that, the better you can serve those people. So Carrie, we're actually running kind of close on our time here.
Okay.
So you have been tremendous. I appreciate your insights and your passion for this topic. If someone wants to know more about you and what the team is up to, what's the best way to connect?
Oh, I would say probably right here on LinkedIn, right? Just send me a request. I'd love to connect and talk more. I could talk about this. I can't believe the time is up. I could talk about this forever, but I hope that this was helpful to those listening. I think if you want to continue the conversation, please reach out. That'd be great.
Awesome. Wonderful. Absolutely. Everybody, right? Click right on Carrie's name. You can see her there in the chat today for the conversation. Click right over to her. I appreciate her for joining us, for sharing some insights there. And don't forget what she said, right? Her kind of framework there for curiosity to make it this fluffy thing to something very actionable. Just think about it in your personal side, the professional side, and also the cultural side. How can we ask questions, be more curious, be more open? And the psychological safety thing too. We didn't come up with that, unfortunately, or in our time. But I think that's a critical piece. That's a critical piece. Actually, would you spend like 1 minute on that? Any advice on how to create an environment or how to encourage an environment of psychological safety where we can ask questions without feeling like we're putting ourselves out there too much? Or maybe the answer is put yourself out there because it's worth it. It's worth the risk.
Well, I would personally just put myself out there. I would, but I understand that that's really tricky depending on where you work. And I think definitely Amy Edmondson is the authority, in this. But I would say just the quick answer, Ben, is that it starts at the top. The leadership has to ask and solicit feedback. And then when they receive candor, when they receive an honest, true, piece of feedback that they may not want to hear, they have to listen. They have to hear it, they have to listen, and there can't be any ramifications on the person who bravely spoke out and said, you asked me for my feedback, here it is. So it starts at the top, as with anything, with learning, anything, Ben, it starts at the top. They have to model, and then it'll trickle down, within the organization.
I don't even less than a minute, but that was still like a master class on how to build a better culture. So thank you for that.
You were talking about when managers ask their people, when they have conversations with them and they say, what do you want to do? What's next for you? What inspires you? What do you like doing? I think when people, just because someone is good at something doesn't mean that's what they want to do or that they enjoy doing it.
I'm blanking on the book right now. That's not curiosity.
Right.
One of the key things in that, I've got the book now. Gosh darn it.
Well, I'll tell you, while you're thinking about it, I can say that I think that when leaders think about the future of the organization, today's young workforce, they're not going to sit still in the same job just because they have a job and they feel lucky to have one. That was my parents' generation. My dad over the years has told me, because I've always been someone, and I recognize that this isn't as common, but I've always been someone, as soon as I was unhappy in a role, I would find a new one. I just wouldn't settle. And I'm glad, that that's been my approach. But my dad would always be like, oh, you have a job, you have a good job. Just stay there and appreciate it. And that's, that's not his fault. That's his generation, and what they were taught and learned. And I just think organizations who think that people are lucky to have a job there are missing it. They're missing it. Their job is to say thank you and how can we help you be better and do more and be more passionate.
I remember what that was, by the way, and it fits right into that perfectly. Actually, that was a good segue. The book talks about all of us have a zone of incompetence, things we're not good at. We usually don't have jobs in that space, or if you do, not for long. You have zones of competence where you can just do it and you're okay at it, right? And that's what you're talking about, where I can do this job and I can do it for a long time, but I'm never going to be the best person at it. And then we all have a zone of genius. And it's about how can we get more time in that zone of genius? Because the ideal job is where you're spending all of your time there. That probably doesn't exist for most people, where you can spend all of your time in the area that you're better than 99% of the world at that thing. But the more time you can carve out for people, and there's an author that I love, Chester Elton, he talks about job sculpting. Like, how can you sculpt this job for that person so they're spending more time in that zone of genius? Because they'll be excited, they'll bring their best effort, they'll be more creative and more productive in that sort of area than anybody else you could put in there. Doesn't matter how much you pay them, because it's not tied to money, it's not tied to those kind of things. All the research shows that you can throw money at knowledge workers, and if they're not in the right space, it's not going to matter. It's not going to lead to better outcomes there. So that zone of genius piece, and I just love that vision of, I'm always thinking about that in the back of my mind, like, is this my zone of genius? Or if it's not, how can I delegate that? And how can I stop doing that? And how can I, whatever else, spend less time on that and get into those areas where or in this case, right, your employees where they are going to be best. But managers, to your point, managers are not going to know that if they're not having those conversations and asking their people. They're going to make assumptions about what Carrie's good at, about what Ben's good at, about what anybody else is good at.
And it's often we make those assumptions. First of all, I'm very inspired by that idea of zone of genius. I hadn't heard that, so thank you. That gets me really excited. But I will say that, going back to this idea that managers assume, they're not asking, so they just assume, and we only have one lens from which to assume, and it's our own. And so I have a funny story for you, actually, if you're interested. Years and years ago, I was running a regional sales team. And I would get the group together. It was in the Midwest. We're regional to the Midwest. And I would get the group together once a month. And I loved those meetings. I looked forward to them. I thought everybody else did as well. And I started a book club. I'm a huge reader, have been a reader my whole life. I love reading. And I started a book club. I thought, what a great thing. I love reading. We're all going to read a book and we're going to talk about it when we come together. And after a few months of having this book club, as part of the meeting, it wasn't the only part of the meeting, but, it was an agenda item. I had a colleague come to me, someone who was on the team, and he was in tears then. And he said, I hate reading. I'm terrible at it. I'm starting to dread these meetings because I don't want to read the book and I can't contribute to the conversation. And I'll tell you, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I was so grateful to him. And this is, 15 years ago, and it still sticks with me today, because I, as a young manager, assumed that because I love to read, everybody does. And whoa, was I wrong. From that moment, I stopped the book club and I made it optional. If anyone wanted to read a book and talk with me about it, it wasn't a part of that meeting anymore, because I thought, oh my gosh, I just made this silly assumption that everybody was just like me. And oh my gosh, no, nobody is just like me. It was crazy.
So we had a false start on the ending there a minute ago, but that was a great way to wrap it up. Thank you again to you, Carrie. I appreciate you. For everybody else out there, make sure you click on her name, connect with Carrie, tell her how much you love her, because I think she's tremendous. And we'll catch you on another session of HR Summer School coming right up.
Well, likewise, Ben. Thank you.
Goodness, I love the story with Carrie. And we started wrapping up and I asked one more thing and we were like going back and forth with stories, and I had, you know me, I told you last year, I'm a sucker for stories. So I have to throw one back her way every time she shares one with me. And at some point we got to pull the plug. Otherwise we'll never, ever get off the virtual stage. So Carrie, I appreciate you. You're doing a tremendous job. And that was so much fun to learn from you. And again, to get some inspiration from you on the importance of asking questions and how valuable that can be in a personal context, in a professional context, and all of those kinds of things. So we're going to take a quick, it's called a break, I guess. I'm still working. I'm not taking a break. So hanging out with you here. If you need to take a quick restroom break, get you a drink, whatever you need to do, feel free to do that. So reminder on the agenda today, we've got a couple different things rolling. And so between the morning and the second half of the content for the day, we're taking a quick second here, because I'm going to give away some stuff again. So some of you this morning got some giveaways, a couple of quick things. Number one, we're going to hear from Trent Cotton in a little bit about the importance of recruiting and some of the things that he does to create better relationships and to create better outcomes with recruiting. I had a tremendous conversation with Maria, who we're going to hear from in just a minute. I think I called her Gloria earlier, and Maria, I apologize. Maria Ortiz, she was one of our attendees last year, and I saw that she recently started a new job, so she's our first person to feature this week on a kind of where are they now, talking to graduates, or someone called themselves a sophomore or freshman earlier. I loved it in the comments that said they were first time, so they're freshmen. I love that idea. So she is a sophomore this year, and we're going to hear from Maria. One of the things that she and I talked about that didn't make it on camera because I had to shorten it up, we talked about the challenge of recruiting right now and how hard it is to find people. And if that's you and you're struggling to find talent and you are one of those millions of companies that are posting jobs and hoping that you can find enough people, right, you're in good company there. And so actually I'm going to post this in the chat really in just a bit. There's a link to an ebook I want to share with you. It's got two lenses on it, actually. Number one, it's let's access the talent source that we have not accessed in the past. And let's also look at it through the lens of DEI. How can we weave this in and think about creating a more inclusive environment with our hiring processes. And so I'll post that into the chat in just a second because I can't make the link work right this second while I'm here talking and sharing with you. But it's a great ebook from our friends over at Checker, who are one of the sponsors this week. And it's a book on fair chance hiring. Some insights there, some data, some stories. So if you've never approached that with your leadership, or you've never thought about that, they'll give you some actual numbers to think about and to look at. And a lot of companies, again, are trying to figure out how to recruit right now. And so that'll give you some tools to do that. Okay, so I'll give you that free resource. I'll post it in the chat in just a moment. Giveaways, giving away a couple more things to people that have been super connected this morning. So Krista, Isaac, and Jenny, same thing I told the team earlier, ping Melanie at upstarthr.com or just ping me, I'll get you her, and we'll make sure and do that. As Greg and George referred to her, Vice President, that's what she deserves. Vice Principal Melanie, she is kind of behind the scenes over here taking care of things and making sure all the logistics are set up. Thank goodness for her. So ping her, she'll get you in touch with you on the giveaways. And without any further ado, I've talked about it a couple times. I'm going to bring up, again, it's a short snippet, 3-4 minutes with me and Maria. She was one of our attendees last year. She started a new job. And so I was talking to her about some of the things she learned. What did summer school mean to you? Because I've heard from so many of you. I've seen so many amazing comments and feedback from you in the last year. But it was so much fun to hear from her kind of one-on-one and let you hear someone's personal story about what summer school meant to her and what it enabled for her on the career front. It's a great conversation, and I can't wait to share that with you. So here we go with Maria.
Hey, I'm excited for the new summer school. Super excited. I'm spreading the word. I'm spreading the word everywhere. You brought something different than normal webinars, or you just brought a lot of things different. What was happening now, where we're at, everybody in the world, right? But also how to deal with what was happening. And I think everybody came in the HR community. We all came together because we all have the same concerns. And I think that's the beauty of being in HR. It's the community.
I would agree with that. The best relationships that I've had are with other HR people who, and on one hand, it's I can get help if I need it. They throw me the life preserver. And sometimes it's just, hey, this is going on. Am I crazy, or is this a real thing? And they're like, no, that's not okay. Don't do that. Or yeah, everybody does that. Like just having that kind of pulse of what else they're thinking. That's been helpful for me.
Yeah. And you know what? We were able to I was able to connect with other HR professionals right after the summit. Mm-hmm. I was able to connect with other people that I could piggyback on ideas. Hey, what is your company doing? In regards to X, Y, and Z. And, oh, that's a great idea. And then I was able to implement some of those in my regular day-to-day, especially when it comes to decision making.
I appreciate that very much. It was so much fun for us to kind of put it together for everybody too. And so one of the things I had seen is that you actually got a new job last year. Tell me about your new role. What's it been like?
I love it. I love it because I actually know I worked with my boss before. I worked with her, I want to say, back in 2006, 2007. And then we all went our own ways. And actually, I was looking, but not really looking. Mm-hmm. And she just happened to text me one day last year and said, hey, do you know anybody who's looking for a job, an HR job? And I said, me.
Yeah, I do know somebody.
Yeah, I do know some. I said, yes, I do. Me. And then I came over and then she gave me a tour, and it's in manufacturing. That's my background, manufacturing. So I gave my 2 weeks notice and then started at the beginning of the year. And no question asked. I just said, things happen for a reason. The universe happens things for a reason. And it happened to land at the right time, at the perfect time. Start the new year and start the new year fresh.
That's fun. That's exciting. I am pumped about that for you. That is so fun.
Thank you. Yes, it's a blessing.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
Well, I don't know if you remember one of the speakers last year, he was talking about being a leader. And I actually asked the question to the audience, talk about a leader that you actually liked or someone that you appreciated. And those that you're talking about there, where they're always on the lookout for good talent and they've actually treated you well. Right? If they had been a terrible and a crummy leader, it's like, hey, who do you know? Sorry, block, wrong number, don't know. You're like, or I'll send it to my worst enemy. They'll be great for you. But we wouldn't do that. But because they had taken care of you, they had supported you as a great leader in the past, you would have recommended someone else if you weren't already looking, So that's so much fun to see that come back around full circle.
It does. And I always read these comments, people leave because how you treat them. And it's so true. Good employees are hard to find. If any company has good employees, please take care of your employees, because people will work for you. It doesn't matter about anything as long as you treat them right. Because compassion and how you treat people, it just takes you to the next level. It really does.
That's one of those things.
Yeah.
Right, go ahead.
And I'm passionate about that, right now when we're like doing some of the hiring, and because I've seen it with my own eyes, how our managers, they really do treat people really good. I always tell them, this is how much I could pay you, but I could tell you, this is going to be a home. It's not just a job. It's going to be a home, because this is where, people here don't leave us. They don't leave. It's long tenure, because it's how you treat them.
I want to say, if you think back, like I had HR and business classes and things like that right in school, and there's not a single one that taught compassion as an important skill. And yet, if you think about the experience you've had, the experience you're able to sell to candidates because you're so excited about it, it's based on compassion and loving people and supporting them. And like that is a powerful best practice. And yet there's not a single business book out there that says, love on your people, be compassionate, care about them. And you're like, you're missing this critical thing. It's all about ROI and strategy. And like, maybe what if the strategy is just be kind to people? All right. Hope you enjoyed that quick little snippet there with Maria. It was so much fun for me. And again, we went on a little bit, but we just talked about her new role. And what I loved about it is she brought up some connection that she had last year maybe I brought it up, a connection from last year's content, right? When you're a great leader, that pays dividends, not just today. You see the benefits sometimes immediately, but sometimes it's long term when you see those benefits and the impacts and the reach that you have on people. And that leader that had been kind and supportive and compassionate and generous with her years before reached out at just the right time for her to step into a new role. And so that was so exciting for me to see that and to hear from her. She was just so pumped about summer school coming back. And just like many of you, I saw the freshman and the sophomore tags there in the chat. We need to get some shirts that say freshman or sophomore. I'll get Vice Principal Melanie working on that, because that'd be so much fun. So we talked about what's coming up. Let me look back at my agenda here. Next up, we're going to go right into another piece of content, another conversation with Trent Cotton. We're going to hear from Trent about, again, recruiting, better outcomes. I had a chance to meet Trent virtually. I'm still waiting to do that in person, but he is incredible. He's got the amazing deep voice that I can't do, but he's got a great voice. And we're actually going to do some giveaways during the session. So stay tuned. Listen in, and when I call you out, do what I say in the chat, and you'll get a chance to win some of those books of his that we're going to be giving away. So let's see if I can get Trent up and running.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another session here at HR Summer School. I'm really excited to talk to Trent Cotton here. Goodness, I had the chance to meet him virtually over a year ago, do a podcast with him, and honestly, it was one of my favorites, and I've heard from so many people that it was one of their favorites as well. His expertise, his deep specialty is around recruiting. Trent, welcome to the conversation.
Hey man, how are you? Long time no talk.
Hey, I've been looking forward to this so much. It's going to be a great discussion, and I can't wait. So before we get into some of the fun stuff, will you take a minute or so and tell us who Trent is, what you do?
All right, yeah, I guess the Twitter bio for me is that I am the Director of Talent Acquisition and Talent Strategies, or kind of like employee experience, for Bureau Veritas. We are one of the leading global testing, inspection, and certification companies, and I get the honor to try and figure out how do we navigate through this very tumultuous and challenging talentscape that we have going on currently.
That is a common challenge.
Yes.
And we were chatting a little before we actually started recording about, we could take this in 100 different directions, because everyone today is trying to figure out, okay, how do we find talent? How do we get this in the door? How do we figure these things out? But one of the things that you kind of said that triggered this for me was you talked about you recently took a new role, right, within the last 6 months, year,
Right.
sometime in that time frame.
January.
Okay, yeah. So very recent. Congratulations on that, number one.
Thank you.
But also, one of the things you talked about was, as you were coming into this role, one of the things that you did that was probably different from a lot of people who take recruiting roles was you spent a lot of time digging into how does the business work? How does it operate? How does it function? Why would you spend your time doing that when you could be talking about recruiting strategy and things like that?
Well, I think a lot of times recruiting leaders or even recruiters, they go in and say, let's just build a strategy. And if you don't do all the digging behind it, it is very similar to shoot, ready, aim kind of a strategy. Honestly, Ben, I think a part of it, I was a business person before. You and I talked about this in the previous podcast, and fell into HR. I hated HR, and I could not believe that I was actually getting into HR. But whenever I got in, I wanted to change because I never wanted to lose sight of what it felt like to be on the other side of the phone. I need talent, or I need advice, I need this. And I felt like all HR or recruiting was saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do this. Fit into this box. And I mean, that was 20 something years ago, a long time ago. Let's not talk about the number of years, but it was a long time ago. But honestly, that never left me. So whenever I started interviewing for this job and started meeting with executives, I remember one of the interview questions was, so what's going to be your recruiting strategy? And I apologize. I said, I'm really bad about answering questions with questions, but what are the what are the profit levers that you need to be able to move to be successful in 2021? And he goes, what does that have to do with recruiting strategy? I said, everything. If I don't know what's driving those profit levers, then I don't know how to build a talent portfolio to be able to help you move that along. And so whenever I look at transforming TA, wherever I am, whether it's doing a podcast like this, or leading a team, or doing consulting for some companies, the first thing I always tell them is, you've got to start looking at yourself as a business consultant who deals in the commodity of talent. So I guess my currency is the talent that I have in my portfolio, and I just need to be able to find the right person in the right role at the right time. And the only way I can do that is if I know as much about how that business works as the line of business manager does. And if you do that, then you create this language between the two of you to where they start forgetting that you're HR or recruiter or whatever. They start seeing you as a confidant. Yes. And that to me, that's whenever you're in. When they just call and go, hey, maybe not in your world, but I just need to bounce an idea off of you. I love those kind of calls.
I actually had a conversation yesterday with someone, and that's how I have a good friend. That's how they knew they had arrived when they started getting calls about things. They're like, hey, I know this isn't a people thing, but give me your input on this. Give me your advice on this, because they see you again as an expert in the business. And just some people in business, their lever they pull is money. Some people in business, their lever they pull is people. And if we can use and look at the talent as a resource to solve those problems, that sets us up to be brought into a lot of those discussions. And that flips the script on that whole, how do I get invited to these conversations? How do I get in? Well, you start becoming an expert in the business, and they want to talk to you. They'll come to you. They'll approach you.
And you hit on two key things. The whole seat at the table thing, there's nothing that makes my blood curdle more whenever I hear someone that goes, I deserve a seat at the table. No, you earn that seat at the table. You earn it with your credibility. You earn it with your ability to drive performance results, whether it's in talent or on the line of business. And getting back to what you were talking about, kind of being asked to consult, there was a company I consulted 11, 12 years ago, and they hit me up, I think 2 months ago on LinkedIn, and said, I got a burning question, can we chat? I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going to go. And so we got on the phone, and he kind of started walking through how they were thinking about changing their product line, and he wanted to know about the impacts on talent. And of course we talked through that, but I just kind of stopped him. Let's just call him John. I said, okay, John, but now that we kind of go through the people thing, why in the hell are you doing this? Because you're about to cannibalize your own business. So are you willing, is this product going to be that strong that's going to propel you forward in a new profit area at the risk of kind of eating your own? I said, that's just, walk me through that. Help me understand that. Maybe I'm missing something. And it was the question that nobody would ask him. But I mean, even as a consultant, when he was paying me, I wasn't an employee. I mean, I would tell him stuff that was just right off the top of my head, sometimes not good, but I asked the hard questions. And I think that talent consultants and recruiters, I've noticed we've kind of got this retail mentality still stuck in our heads. The clients, it's one of two, what do you call it, extremes. the client's always right, so we do everything that they want us to do, even whenever it doesn't make sense. Or
here's our 87 requirements to this job.
yes,
Good luck.
yes, yeah. I saw one the other day that said, you know, the requirements from the job are MBA, 7 years of experience, ability to be able to do data analysis, and starting pay was like $15 an hour. And you know, that's what the recruiter was saying. And then the hiring manager was like, why can't we find candidates? And it was, of course, it was a meme, but I mean, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yes.
So I think that, you know, finding that diplomatic backbone to where you can say, all right, I understand the importance of X, Y, and Z, but let me challenge you. Here's what the talentscape looks like. And, you know, both you and I are data people. We're data nerds. We love data. I always lead with data. These are business people. Numbers is the universal language between HR and a line of business. So the more an HR professional can get in and understand what is the story that the data is telling us, and then be able to relay that back to our clients, to me, that's an easy way to gain some credibility. And it gives you the ability to kind of play in your own space, because you can look at the data about people and you know what it's saying, and then you're going to have to translate it in some capacity. You're going to have to translate it for your client, but it's going to open up that door so you can start asking questions, and it puts you both on the same playing field.
Absolutely. Goodness. One of the things we started talking about, kind of executive conversations, right? Leadership conversations, but that also applies kind of the hiring manager context, how you interact with them, how you engage with them, how you build those relationships, because they're, like it or not, they're stakeholders in the recruiting function, because you're serving them in some capacity on a frequent or an irregular basis.
Right.
And one of the things we saw in our research this year is, for the first time ever, hiring manager relationships jumped into the top 5, and it hasn't done that in the 4 or 5 years we've been recording this. And one of the things I'm hearing around that, so I'm curious, like, why, is part of it is driven by the fact that more companies are doing more virtual work, and those hiring managers have never before had to hire anyone they couldn't look at and get a feel for. And again, we know that's not the best way to hire, right? That's not a good indicator of whether they're a good fit. Is they feel good when you're interviewing them, but still that's a gap they've had. And so they're relying more heavily on their HR and their talent acquisition teams to help them overcome that. And so I don't know if that's a challenge that you've seen the last year, but that's one of the things that we saw in the data that just popped up. And so I wanted to make sure we touched on, make sure we got across the hiring manager piece of this, not just big picture, because even those little micro interactions day to day, how you set expectations, the things you share back and forth, that's one of the things, again, when I think about people that I know in the space, I know hundreds of recruiters, right? Hundreds of TA leaders.
Yeah.
You do that better than almost anyone I've ever met, because it's really based on not just Trent's view of the world, or I said so, but here's the data, here's what the truth is, and we can use that as a foundation for a conversation.
Right. And you know, it's interesting. In my previous firm, I think I hired 6 people to our team, and I never met them until the day that I met them in either Birmingham or Houston to train them. And I'd never thought anything about it, because, you know, as a leader for recruiters, I'm always, whenever I'm interviewing, I'm thinking of, okay, how does this person sound over the phone? Because this is how they're going to sound to my candidates, and this is how they're going to sound to my hiring manager. So for me, it was kind of an afterthought. But COVID, you know, some of the managers just, well, they can't come in. We can all wear masks. I'm like, okay, you're totally missing the point. Customers are not going to be coming into, you know, I was working for a bank at the time. Customers are not going to be coming into the branch. Listen to the person's voice. Listen to how they interact. Can you hear them smiling? And, you know, of course, we have video and things like that. But to me, I think it's a lot easier to smooth somebody personally, because you can use certain body language, and, you know, there's all kinds of other factors. But whenever you're on video, it's I mean, you and I do this often. You know, you have the bright light shining in front of you, and it's just you and the camera. It can be a little.
So you over there, Trent?
Right. It's a little daunting sometimes. So I think that for hiring managers, what I gave them, I said, you know, look, kind of embrace that vulnerability, but also recognize the vulnerability of the person that you're interviewing, and it's going to give you a totally different view of that candidate. Whereas in front of you, I think they would probably put on their sales pitch, they dress nice, smell nice, you know, greet you, and all that other kind of stuff. All of that is stripped down and into kind of the bare minimum, even in a virtual interview. So I think that one of the things that I believe in, it's you know, is to lead with vulnerability. And and to share with the managers, look, this is new for me. I've been doing monthly, we call them MMRs, monthly manager review sessions. So kind of at each different line of business, we kind of do a monthly review of finance to sales. Of course, I cover the TA portion of it. And part of the TA update is I go over the turnover and what's going on in the market. And for me, it's nothing to say, team, I have never seen this kind of a labor shortage, compression whenever it comes to workforce participation, which is driving up wages. And we've got a segment of the workforce that has been without, I think, and you know the numbers probably better than I do, but 6% of the workforce, or excuse me, 43% of the workforce is not even engaged. I mean, they've been out of work for longer than 27 weeks. They're not, they have removed themselves from the workforce. I've never experienced anything like that. So team, hiring team, I'm at a loss, you're at a loss, we're going to have to get creative. So I've leveled the playing field. I've admitted I don't have all the answers. And of course, all of this happens whenever I change industries and I'm trying to learn a new industry, trying to learn a new company. And then, here comes the trifecta of doom whenever it comes to TA. So, that's just how I roll. I like to do that kind of stuff. But I think creating that intimacy, and I know that's a weird word to use with hiring managers, especially in HR, because we don't like to talk about feelings, but, having that level of intimacy leading with vulnerability is going to strengthen the relationship that you have with your hiring managers, and you're going to be able to do tremendous things. And I think that it's going to open up an avenue for you to do some creative solutions, and it's going to give you the ability to fail. That's I think still whenever I coach a couple of different recruiters, and I'm like, hey, have you tried this? No, I don't know if that'll work. Have you tried it? No, then try it for 2 weeks. What do you have to lose? It'll be one less thing. Okay, well, that didn't work. Let me figure out what does. So I think that kind of going through all of this, we can use this time of uncertainty to bond with our hiring managers and try some new things, because this is a totally different talent landscape, whether you're talking about recruiting or HR, because there's implications on both.
I want everybody listening to this to take a second and write down vulnerability and intimacy, because as you said, both of those, when you're thinking, I want to be a strong leader in my organization, I want to command respect, and those two words are on the opposite ends of that spectrum, right? I'm just going to be vulnerable. I'm going to tell you, I don't know, but I'm going to tell you, like, here's what I do, here's what I don't, and I need you to help me work along and figure out what the answer might be here. Again, part of that is, here's what I think, here's my guess, but I want to get your input. And part of that, like you said, is let's try something we've never tried before. Let's experiment a little bit. Let's break something for the better, and non-fatal failures, all those kinds of things. I had a great discussion this week with a leader, the CEO of a tech company. And one of the things that he said that kind of struck me was, I was asking what he sees among those companies that are really forward thinking their talent strategies. He said, really, it's not that they do like this one cool thing that everybody else can copy. It's that they're willing to iterate, try, and we tried that thing, and Trent's like, never again, that didn't work. Right. Or we tried this thing and hey, it got 2% better. What if we try something else and we get another 5% better? And over time, we're making these small changes that lead to a better process, a better approach, everything else. And so I want to make sure I went off on a tangent there. Everybody listening in, write those things down. Vulnerability, intimacy, because those are critical pieces of building better relationships with your stakeholders. And even though it's so funny to hear the paradox here, because you started off, Trent, with data, numbers, evidence, those are key parts of this, but so too is the human side of it, and really understanding you're dealing with another person that doesn't have all the answers either, and laying that out there and being open with them can lead to a better and a deeper relationship.
Well, and two, not to do a little plug or anything, but that's why I titled the book about sprint recruiting. It's innovate, iterate, and accelerate. And that's something that, and even now implementing it again in a new firm, in a new industry, trying to test it and say, okay, is this going to work across different industries? And having this trifecta of doom happen right about that time. So, what it is, I guess the methodology allowed us to be able to, I kind of set the stage and said, hey, we're going to try some stuff. It's not going to work, but we're going to find something that is. Every 2 weeks, client, we're going to meet and we're going to talk through the absolute same agenda. What worked so that we can scale it, what didn't so we can address it, and how are we going to move forward in prioritization. And it's just this cadence. And sometimes it's brutal. I mean, there's been a couple of sprint calls that I've gotten off the phone going, oh dear God, but the next time we get on there, it's like, hey, well, we tried this new thing. To your point or your example, it worked 10% better. So let's take out the 90% that didn't work and let's scale that 10% and then measure the results. So I think that, if you take away anything, it is that vulnerability creates intimacy is one thing, but the other is to change your mindset to how can I innovate, iterate, and accelerate. So the innovate is come up with something completely wacky. I mean, we're in this time that just about anything goes. I mean, if you would have told me 18 months ago that I'd be worried about gas prices, I'd be worried about can I go out? I'd have to wear a mask everywhere. I would have called you an idiot, but those are the times that we're in. So let's take advantage of that. Let's try some new crazy stuff. So that's your innovate. And then the iterate comes into what worked, what didn't, scale what works, decline or get rid of or address whatever obstacles that you're running into. And then the third just happens naturally. Once you start kind of addressing some of those obstacles and have those tough discussions with all of the stakeholders involved. If it's a process, get all the process people in there and say, this crap ain't working. We got to figure out what is going to work, and everyone take their feelings, off of their shoulders and keep the client and the employee and the candidate, let them have a seat at the table and re-energize that conversation and refocus that conversation. And then the acceleration, that just comes as a natural reaction. And the beautiful part of that, though, Ben, is that as you start to accelerate and you get those quick wins and then they start to, you iterate towards success, it becomes almost addictive because you start with, I call it kind of cracking the door. You crack the door with a little bit of innovation and iteration, and then you open it and you're like headlong going, okay, hey, I want to fix this. And then you're going to find that your clients or your hiring partner or your managers are going to say, hey, well, yeah, let's keep this. But I mean, if it worked over here, what about this? Can we change this? And that's whenever you have to put some kind of a system in place to make sure that you stay on course, because if not, then, you're going to be trying to fight 16 different battles and leading, 42 different revolutions, and you're not going to be successful. So, pick 2 to 3 things at the most that you want to change along with your partner. And then just kind of work through that 3-step punch is what I call it, innovate, iterate, and accelerate.
So for those of you listening, Trent just very slyly mentioned that he has a book. And so I'm going to make sure we're giving away 10 of those copies. So right now in the comments, chat, mention me, mention Trent, and tell him something that you're going to do, something that you're going to change. If it's just, you're going to be more vulnerable, if it's, you're going to change how you're measuring something, it's, you're going to try some experiment with your hiring managers. I don't care what it is. Tell him we're going to grab 10 of you that respond quickly, and we're going to give you copies of his book. We'll get those shipped out to you. This is as a way to say thank you to him for sharing his expertise with us, but also to say thank you for being willing to kind of step up and put yourself out there, right? Be vulnerable, as he said, right? Have some vulnerability in this process, because it will lead to better results down the line. So Trent, if someone wants to connect with you, wants to learn more about the work that you're doing, the book, anything like that, is there a place they can go?
Yeah, of course, LinkedIn. You can find me at Trent Cotton. I'm on Twitter at Trent Cotton, all one word. And then the blog is sprintrecruiting.com. And you can find the book on Amazon just by searching Sprint Recruiting and my name. So, and the only thing that I ask is if you read the book, leave a review. I love to read the reviews, and I always like to provide feedback. So
I owe you a review, by the way. So absolutely. All right. To everybody else, I hope you enjoy the conference with Trent. Stay tuned for more HR Summer School coming right up.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, so I can't keep up with the comments right now. I'm going to have to come back to those in just a minute. But if you are one of those people commenting that want a copy of that book, and you're commenting about what you're going to do, what you're going to try to change, I will come back to that shortly. We have a couple more sessions today. I want to make sure we continue on, because the next one who's on the agenda for us is actually, again, I'm trying to remember if I've met any of the actual speakers who were speaking this year. I don't know that I have. Last year, many of the speakers I had actually met in person. This year, I was kind of branching out. So many of them, they're on my to meet list, and hopefully they'll be on your to meet list whenever those kind of opportunities come back around. But the next one up for us is actually Francisco Reyes. So Francisco and I met virtually last year. He kind of found summer school towards the end, I believe, and participated a little bit. He's been in the chat some today. I've already seen him active there, so I know he's around. It is very late where he is over in Spain. So give him a hello, give him an hola, if you will. And I'm so excited to hear from him. His focus is behavioral science, behavioral economics, how we make decisions as humans. And I asked him to talk to us about this and how that factors into what we're doing. And what's fun is when I put the agenda together, I didn't know what Trent was going to talk about. I had no clue. And so he already kind of gives us some insight into iterating and experimenting and trying and being willing to experiment a little bit. And we're going to hear some of that and some other things from Francisco in this following conversation. So let me get him queued up and bring him in. And I'm going to go back and check the comments while this is running and get the list of people that are going to get a copy of Trent's book, and we'll reach out to you and get that sorted out. So hang tight and we'll get this rolling. All right, Francisco, here we go.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another session here at HR Summer School. I'm really excited not just to be here with you, not just to be learning alongside you, but to have the opportunity and the honor of chatting with my friend here today, Francisco. He is an expert in the area of behavioral science, behavioral economics, how we make decisions as humans. And as I'm saying that out loud, you're probably thinking, oh, wow, I want to take some notes here, and you absolutely should. I'm going to be taking notes myself over here. I've got my pen ready to go because I want to learn some things as we're going through the conversation today too. Francisco, welcome, sir. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, man. Wow, I'm honored and thrilled to be with you today with all the audience. Last year, I was a fan attending the conference and the HR Summer School. It was a great success. I'm so honored to be here with you.
It is my pleasure to have you here. We were chatting before we actually started recording a minute ago, and one of the things I told you a behind the scenes look for everybody listening now, one of the things that I was doing, one of the things I was thinking of as I was trying to plan out the agenda for this year is I wanted to make sure we were bringing in other perspectives on things, not just in HR, but things outside of our bubble, right, to help us be better and smarter and to do our jobs. Because we've all heard, here's your 10 tips for your 401ks or your employee leave and those kinds of things, or benefits plan. You can get that content anywhere. I really want to bring some different perspectives to the table that help us to be better and more well-rounded as we're thinking about how to perform in our jobs and our careers long-term and support our company. So what I want to talk to you about specifically, again, you're an expert in the area of kind of behavioral science, a little bit about some of the big picture things, and just get us, no, I'm sorry, I skipped over even asking you to introduce yourself. So let's take a minute. I got all excited.
No worries,
I do this every time I'm in a meeting. I dive into the fun stuff. Take a minute, Francisco. Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I'm the co-founder of Behave4. Behave4 is a behavioral economics company. Currently we are doing consulting in behavioral economics applied to HR in the HR space. We help organizations to shape people's behaviors to deliver better results. And the end, bringing a different perspective to HR, because I think we need to look at different numbers. I'm going to explain further afterward. Yeah, I'm the co-founder, and I'm so happy to help organizations to understand better their people, right?
Why in the world, when you were a child, you said, when I grow up, I want to understand human behavior? Probably not. Like, what
not at all. Not at all. Yeah, it's a good question. When I was a child, I wanted to be a basketball professional because I was a huge fan of Michael Jordan. Of course, I have to say it is about the journey. It's about the journey. I came into sales in the pharmaceutical industry, and I wanted to deliver a better service. I wanted to understand better my clients. And then I started to, wow, I need to acquire more knowledge about how people behave and the way they do, to be able to understand them better, and as a consequence to be more effective, to be more efficient, and to be more successful in the people side. And I started to study about brain, how our brain works, about emotions. I was reading Antonio Damasio, probably one of the famous neuroscientists in the world. It was a journey, right? And then it leads me to be here today, founding this company, doing this amazing job, and I'm learning every day about human behavior.
Even those of us that study it, often we get some lessons firsthand in different experiences and things like that. So thank you for that, because I wanted to help set the stage for the audience to understand, your background that you bring to the table, the expertise, because HR, I often say this, is about, for better or for worse, it's about modifying behaviors. It's about getting people to do things they sometimes don't want to do. It's about finding ways to bring together different viewpoints, different perspectives to find a common ground and things like that. And so when I think about those kinds of things, the person that's best suited, most of us that have traditional HR training never got anything around how behavior fit into that equation. We never got anything about how people make choices and make decisions. And so what are some of those kind of common things that someone that is your background, that understands behavioral science, understands behavioral economics, what are some of the things that are fundamental? This is why we do these things, and those principles that might be applicable over to someone who works in HR, talent, learning, those kind of functions that we're talking to here today.
Yeah, first of all, I want to encourage everybody to read or study about behavioral science. I think it's really important because human resources typically is about people, is about humans. Behavioral science studies human behavior. You can see the dots connecting both worlds of this space, and that is one of the reasons that I'm here running this company and applying this to HR. Said that, I think we need to understand that probably many HR pros are going to agree with me as the context affects us, the way we behave. We need to understand that when the context changes, people's behaviors change too. And that is the first, right? And the second is probably is one size doesn't fit all at all. Because you imagine, Ben, you in a particular organization can behave in a particular way, and then you move to another job, another position, another organization, and the culture is different. And you are going to behave differently. It doesn't mean that you are not you. Obviously, you have this intrinsic behavior that in particular is what we measure. But then when you are in a different environment, in a different context, working with different teammates, you're going to behave differently.
Both of those will be related in some ways, right? Because I'm thinking about the first one you mentioned is context. I can think about different times, even when I'm at work, if I'm around a certain group of people, I'm going to talk differently than when I'm around my boss or other members of the senior leadership team. I'll talk differently, I'll act differently, so we respond in those sort of situations. I want to go back to one of the things you talked about, though, a little bit ago, because the healthcare crisis you mentioned in the last year has been on the forefront for every HR leader, whether your people are working virtually, remote, or they're working in the office, doesn't matter, regardless, that still is the conversation you're having. And that fear, probably, I don't know if that's the only emotion wrapped into that, but there are multiple emotions, caution and concern and everything else wrapped into that. And those affect how we're making decisions. And I want to hear from you, because as companies are talking now about, okay, how do we come back? How do we return to the office? That's probably part of that bigger conversation. And people who are the employees, they're going to have all those things swirling around as they're thinking about, what does this next phase mean for me? So if I'm an HR leader, how do I address that? How do I mitigate that risk? How do I try to hit that before it becomes a problem?
I think you point out that question that is so trending just right now. And we are seeing many research trying to figure out what's going on, what is coming next with this situation. I think if you listen to the top pros in this space, I think we are going to see more hybrid workplaces instead of fully remote, because we need to balance this, because there are people that probably are going to be more comfortable working from home and others more comfortable working in the office because they can't work at home because they have family there or wherever. But we need to understand this better. My advice is we need to measure. We need to measure. If you don't measure, you are not gonna find responses. And the way that we can measure we need to gather behavioral data. The problem is not control. It's not micromanagement. It's not productivity. Probably the issue here is that we are looking at the wrong numbers. Understand what I'm saying? You should look your numbers. You should look your performance. You should look at your productivity or KPIs or whatever. That's right. But you need to incorporate a different pool data set, behavioral data, because behavioral data is about your people's behaviors. And that is critical just right now to understand what is behind it, what's going on with your team dynamics in a digital environment, a fully remote environment, or in a hybrid, right? Because obviously when you are changing the context, like what we are talking, if you are, imagine that if you are risk averse, it's gonna be different than if you are not. If you are loss averse, if you are long run oriented or impatient, if you are impatient, you need to know what's going on now, not in a month, not in 6 months. You need to figure out what is going to happen with your schedule, with your, if you have to back to the office or not. Uncertainty is going to be dangerous here. And we need to work really hard in improving our communication with our teams, with our staff. But first of all, we need to embrace this experimental mindset. Even if you are in HR, that is not wrong.
That experimental mindset thing has come up in a lot of conversations recently. And I want, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about that a little more, because when I'm fascinated by the idea of experimenting on people as a way to find out what works best for them, right? One of the first people I ever followed, for example, when I got into HR all those years ago, very influential on my early thinking about the space, because I had all of the traditional kind of stuff in college that said, these are the things that matter. And it was all about, here's the laws, here's the legal stuff, here's everything else. But his focus was the people matter more than everything else. Yes, you've got to take care of that stuff. But that's the minimum stakes. That's not how you want to be. That shouldn't be the top, the paragon of what you're trying to do from an employer perspective. And one of his key kind of tenets was, we should be treating people like guinea pigs, be experimenting on something all the time, trying to find out what works best, how can we take care of them better, what things are they wanting that we can offer. And so talk about a company or even an HR professional, a leader's willingness to experiment, because you mentioned, risk aversion a minute ago. Many people that get into HR probably are pretty risk averse because it's the job to keep the company out of trouble. And yet I have seen time and time again that some of the best people in our field are those that very much have an orientation towards people, but also have a low orientation towards rules, because the rules get in the way of our ability to take care of people.
Yeah, I think probably everybody knows now that the HR role is different, has changed. It's not anymore the administrative staff or legal staff or whatever. We should do it, of course, but it's the time to be people first again, to look at our people and then make the changes that we need to change to survive this huge crisis that is going to come in terms of financial crisis, right? Because obviously we are not envision the consequences now, but it's going to come for sure in the future, because the world is in crisis in general. And secondly, doing experiments in my organization as an HR is not expensive. It's not difficult, right? But we need to embrace this mindset of, okay, if I want to, I'm going to give you an example. If I want to foster cooperation because it's critical now, corporate more than ever, you need to know that you are going to have in your organization conditional cooperators that only cooperates if others cooperates. That is pretty cool to know. And unconditional cooperators. They are going to cooperate always, without doubt. But they can become burnout if you don't take care of them. How to know that? You need to measure. You need to measure people's behavior first, and then once you have this landscape about cooperation or even trust is more critical, even trust, then you have this landscape, you can act, you can set integration, you can change your environment, you can act, you can adapt quickly. That is not expensive. You only need to have this or embrace this scientific mindset about experimentation. And thankfully, there are many people like you, Ben, helping HR pros to embrace this approach, because we tend to think that, oh, this is highbrow or so difficult, or I can't because I'm not a scientist. You don't have to be a scientist. You only have to be surrounded with the right people and help you embrace this thing. Because once you go to the C-suite and say, hey, this is the landscape, this is the behavioral data, we need to do this and this. if we want to improve our organization further, right? You have data.
One of the things you mentioned earlier is around understanding the behaviors of our people. And you mentioned that a couple of times actually, because, and I'm glad you brought that up. I want to come back to that and talk about it for a little bit. When I think about behaviors, when in general in HR, we're measuring lots of things, but many times it's not a behavior specifically. We're not thinking about the actual behaviors we're trying to drive. And yet what I started off with was most of the time we're trying to drive a behavior, get someone to complete this task, do that process, do that form, go through this workflow. We're trying to get people to do these things, sometimes for the sake of compliance, and sometimes because it truly is good for them long term to do those things, even if in the moment it might not feel very fun. And I'm thinking about how do we, it might be a really big question, but how do we identify the right behaviors, whether it's from a performance perspective or from a hiring perspective? Like I can see the benefit of turning away from this person makes me feel good in the interview process to these are the behaviors required for success for this job I'm interviewing them for, and I'm going to try to identify what those behaviors are. Can you talk about that piece of it a little bit? Because this idea of measuring and examining behaviors, I think is powerful. And yet many of us have probably never stopped to think about how to identify the right behaviors. It's just not a thing we come across day to day. So talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question this is. Again, there are people, you get confused with the terminology, right? For me, it's pretty similar to the confusion that we have with competencies. Well, competence is different in each organization. They define competencies in a different manner. With behaviors, it's starting to happen the same. I have to say behaviors are, better said, intrinsic behaviors are pretty related with how people behave, actually, how they make decisions, right, about them and about others, or regarding others, right? It could be. We have two sides. I'm going to give you an example. We measure behaviors like long-run orientation, if you are patient or impatient, if you are cooperative or not, if you are envious or not, if you are compassionate or not, if you coordinate with your teammates or not, these kind of things. That is the first. And also, it's really important to understand that our talent is different from others organizations' talent. It's different in terms of behaviors, right? Behaviorally. I'm going to give you an example. It's not the same talent that Apple has, that Microsoft has, because as we said previously, the culture is different, right? And you need to attract your right talent in terms of behaviors, right? Because probably your top performance in terms of behaviors is different from others' top performance in terms of behaviors. We are currently doing a project for a multinational call center, and we were describing behaviorally their top performers. And to do that, we need to measure first, we need to assess first, then once we have the data set, we link those behaviors to the KPIs.
Yes.
And then, okay, your talent in terms of behaviors looks like this, right? Then when you are going to the job market to recruit your talent, you have your recipe, you have your algorithm to attract your talent and hire your talent, because probably that talent is gonna fit you better than if you are blind, if you are hiring using self-reported stuff or different things. I think you need to complement this vision with objective data.
We are seeing in our research in hiring and in other areas of the employment process, or talent process, more and more employers in the last year especially have gone all in on different assessment tools. And part of the reason is we've got to hire someone we can't see, so we're trying to get a feel for that candidate and trying to get some objective data. But part of that also is the conversation around diversity, inclusion, equity. We're trying to find a way to be fair and unbiased. And one of the things you talked about a minute ago, you said, hey, we've got a recipe here, but I don't want someone to hear that and think, oh, we're copying, Francisco over here, we're just hitting copy and copying him for all these, cloning him for these employees. No, we're looking for people that have like some of those you mentioned a minute ago, things like compassion, right? Things like a long-term view, those kinds of things. If you're looking for that, doesn't know any sort of boundary related to someone's race or ethnicity or right? Their gender, those
Sure.
don't relate to that. It's about how they're making decisions. And so I wanted to make sure to touch on that piece of it, because I think that's a fundamental difference in a lot of the ways we've hired in the past, a lot of the ways that we select employees. We think about the culture piece. Let's go to the culture thing you talked about a minute ago. We talk about culture. Our culture is about honesty and about open communications, but those aren't actual behaviors. We've got to get beyond those buzzwords to the real behaviors. And that's what I love about what you're sharing here is if we get to that level, we can make better decisions. We can find the right people. The people themselves will be happier because we're rating them on the things we actually want them to do instead of some vague, generic term that we've just arbitrarily decided is what the measure of success is going to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think we should talk about culture addition instead of culture fit, right? And that you are eliminating some biases here and some racism, discrimination, gender gaps or whatever, because we need people that can bring their whole selves to our organization and add value. It's not about fitting, it's about adding value. But to get that, you need to try different things. If you do the same that you are doing till now, nothing is gonna change. And when you are putting emphasis on behaviors or people's behaviors, you are assuring that those persons or those employees, are gonna add you value from the behavioral side, regardless of their competencies or hard skills or technical skills that I suppose that you have it, right? It's about how you behave here. Because I'm gonna tell you one thing. If you are promoting a culture of cooperativeness, that's cool. That's pretty cool. But if your people are not cooperative, you have a really big issue, right? Because we need to talk also about culture alignment, right? And we need to think that the HR pros are responsible to spread the culture and managers to, and the C-suite too, but we need to understand what is our culture in terms of behaviors, and then we need to measure again. We need to measure again to understand what's going on there. And then, okay, that is our culture. We are here. We need to close the gap, right? And then we need to start to think more about our people instead of our numbers. Numbers are important. Don't get me wrong. Businesses need to make money. But what is clear here, and probably some research about that, if we get our people engaged, if we get our people happy in the workplace, they are going to perform better and better. And as a consequence, we are going to make more money. There is a discussion about this now, but probably we need to be in the right side. We need to be in the right side, and we need to assess.
I love that we're talking about things that seem to be on opposite ends of the spectrum. We're talking about humans and emotions and behaviors. That's how we're talking about measurements and numbers and data. And those seems like complete opposite ends, but really being clear on behaviors and pick your use case. When we're hiring, we're going to tell you what behaviors matter, and we're going to look for those behaviors in candidates. And when it comes to performance, we're not going to tell you got a 1, 2, or 3 score, but not give any feedback on that. No, it's here's the behavior we're looking for. If you want to be a 3 or higher, like here's how you do that. And giving people that clarity, that enables you to have this kind of common foundation, a common language you can talk about when it comes to their actual performance. One of the biggest issues I feel like people have in the workplace from an employee perspective is they don't have clear expectations. They don't know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're waiting on their manager to give them some guidance. And that's not our job. We can't do that for every employee. That's impossible from an HR perspective. But what we can do is encourage our managers, as you were saying, Francisco, encourage our managers to make sure that they are talking about behaviors when it comes to outcomes. Don't just talk about, right, do better, do a good job, work harder, but this is the behavior that I'm looking for. If I see that behavior, I'm going to consider that a success. If I don't see that behavior, I won't. And it comes to that the old saying, if it gets measured, it gets done. If we're measuring those behaviors, we're looking for them, I think we're going to start finding them in the right places.
I have many conversations about this too. And one thing that came out to my mind listening to you, Ben, is, okay, we can write on the walls beautiful sentences and quotes about culture and so
values,
on. Values. but we need to take action daily. We need to have this positive intent. We have to be permanently focused on that. And we need to provide with clarity to our managers. Okay, we expect this, and we need to address this in this way. The opposite is not acceptable. It's fun. I like the book written by Bob Sutton, The Asshole Rule. We don't want assholes in the workplace, in reality. And if we really believe in compassion, if we really believe in cooperation, in trust, measure it, provide with clarity to our managers and people, and take action, set interventions, protect that energy, that culture. And probably you're going to be in a very different position. Probably you are going to be ahead of your competitors because you are taking care of your people.
Use the word protect there. And one of the lessons I learned early in my career, I worked for a company that was the best place to work. We had a tremendous leadership team and a CEO I still respect to this day, just an incredible leader. And one of the things that he taught me early about hiring and about culture and about behaviors is you don't build a great place to work, you protect it. You protect it from those other, letting that person through just because we need to hire somebody and you end up regretting it later. You protect it from those bad behaviors. You protect it from those things that could tear it down or pull it away from what you want it to be. And so that stuck with me for a long time. It's not about building this thing brick by brick necessarily, but about protecting it from these other outside influences that could come in and damage what you try to build. So I love that. Let's go. We're getting close on time now. If someone wants to connect with you, number one, if you're listening here, give him a high five for hanging out with us because it's late in the day for him. Give him a high five there virtually in the chats. Make sure you click his name and connect with him because I know he'd appreciate it. He just loves talking to the people in the community. But I won't speak completely for you, Francisco. If someone wants to connect with you, besides LinkedIn, is there another way to do that?
I'm very active on Twitter. Actually, everything started on Twitter with Steve Brown almost 1 year ago. And I love to give back to the community, to the HR community, my community. I'm very active on Twitter, on Instagram too, LinkedIn for sure. And now in Clubhouse, I'm hosting a weekly room on Fridays Eastern Time with Tracy Sponenberg, Jeffrey Zapito, and Nikki Hoyland. Touching all the topics related to HR, challenges, HR tech, leadership, management, behaviors, why not, hiring, yeah.
All that fun stuff. Awesome. So he's in all the places you can connect with him. I know, again, he'd appreciate it. You'll end up smarter as a result. I guarantee it. Francisco, sir, I appreciate you so much for hanging out with me. This has been a treat, a pleasure for me. And to everybody else out there, thank you for sticking with us. We'll see you shortly on another session for HR Summer School.
A pleasure. Thank you, Ben. See you soon.
Goodness. I love Francisco. He is super sharp. And again, as I said, make sure and give him a high five there. One of the things that he and a couple people he talked about, Tracy Sponenberg, Nikki Hoyland, and I missed the third name. They're doing a weekly Clubhouse, which is kind of like an audio, it's not really a podcast, it's a live conversation. They do that weekly on Fridays. So again, you can ping him there in the chat and connect with him on LinkedIn. You can ask him more about that. He'd be more than happy to invite you along, to have you in, and to have you as part of that conversation. So really quick, I want to put this up on screen because it was easiest to do it this way. I was going to give away, I mentioned the resource earlier on fair chance hiring. I posted that in the chat. I'll do that again and make sure we get that out to you again shortly. But for the giveaways for Trent's book, I went through and grabbed the first 10 that I could. There's so many of you said you were going to take action. I want to encourage you to take action. For those of you that are getting a book, the 10 here, you'll have some additional encouragement, but I highly encourage you to check his book out. Definitely takes action on the things that he was encouraging you to as well. So last session today, we're going to end up just a couple minutes over today. So if you have to drop, that's okay. But last session today, we're actually going to hear from Jane Jackson. She is the CHRO at Wistia, and she and I were kind of chatting a while back. I have followed her for many years. We've actually connected many years ago. I got to meet in person 10 years ago maybe now, and just kind of stayed in contact. And it's been so much fun to see her career journey just accelerate over time. And she is like many of us in HR. She is introverted, but and she runs a podcast for them. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And I just wanted to hear from her. I'm like, what's top of mind for you? What are you dealing with? What are you thinking through as a leader of an HR team for an organization? And so she talked through the two big things for her that were top of mind were DEI and how to focus on that, how they're prioritizing it. So some ideas there if you're looking for those, as well as the important topic of burnout for us as HR leaders. I think I say it probably in our conversation, but we are the first ones to say, there's something extra to do. I'll just do that so no one else has to put up with it. So no one else has to have that burden or that challenge. And that has a cost to it, socially, mentally, emotionally, over time. So she's going to talk about that a little bit as well and give us some advice on finding what works for you and what works for her as well, just to give you some ideas there. So last session for the day, let's hear from Jane Jackson. I'm stalling, tap dancing to get this on one screen. Here we go. Hear from Jane. Welcome back to HR Summer School. I am so excited about this next guest. So I'm going to go ahead and go out there and admit that I had to go back and look in my email to find out the first time we had a conversation, because it's been forever and ever in internet years. And it's been almost 10 years now since I first had a connection with Jane, and we chatted back and forth. And I don't know if you remember this actually, Jane, but you were the first person I ever let actually guest post on the blog and write something because you had some really strong opinions on culture and the role of HR and things like that. So I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome to the conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get into all the things we're going to talk about today, because I want to quiz you on some fun things that you and the team are doing around DEI. I want to talk to you about something that HR leaders are dealing with on the other side of that, maybe on a more personal, professional level. Before we get into some of those kind of things, would you give everybody just the short preview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I am the VP of People at Wistia, which is a video marketing software company. I accidentally ended up in HR, moved to tech because it's a more progressive landscape to try different things. And there is a huge focus on culture and wellness that really appealed to me. So I ended up moving to tech, and I really enjoy building companies and kind of trying to get culture to scale as you support business goals and growth. So that's kind of what gets me out of bed every morning.
Awesome. That's so fun. That is the reason, again, we connected all those years ago, is you were sharing some ideas, you were looking for inputs, things like that very, very early on. We were different professionals back then. And it's so much fun to see how you've evolved and grown and now leading your own team. That's so much fun. So one of the things that you have done with the team there, you've actually started a podcast called A Better Workplace, and its focus is DEI broadly. And I was hoping to spend a little bit of time talking about, because you're trying to level you and your team up, you're trying to give them new tools, things like that, and you're learning yourselves as you go, right? So talk about that kind of journey a little bit and some of the things that you're doing on that front to try to create a more equitable workplace.
Yeah, when I joined in 2018, the team had already kind of pulled together a task force to think about a 3-year strategy for DE&I. It was incredibly important to the founders and to leadership team. So I kind of had the privilege of stepping in with both kind of priorities mapped out and also internal buy-in. And so we started that work in 2018 and maybe 2019 in earnest, and focused on some of the things that I think are easier to change. So for example, we knew we needed to revamp how we hire in general. And since we were going to be revamping that, we also really wanted to make sure that we were incorporating different models to make sure that process was fair and equitable. So that means being really focused about what you actually need when you put together a job description versus kind of a wish list of everything that tends to make it less likely that women and people of color are going to apply. Then we also really focused on articulating what the interview plan looked like and what good questions and good answers look like before we met any of the candidates, to try and remove bias and create kind of the same experience for everyone. And so we got to do that a lot in 2018 and 19, and start to build up the funnel and bring more diverse folks into Wistia. We were a pretty homogenous group. And then also started working on kind of our internal systems, kind of really doing a pay equity audit to make sure we weren't seeing any sort of issues there that didn't relate to the job people were actually doing and performance. So we did a lot in 2019, going into 2020. And then I think 2020 for everybody really shone a light on how important and ongoing this work needs to be. So we took some time to kind of take a step back, revisit our vision and our mission, revisit our strategy, and try to think about how to keep this work staffed on an ongoing basis so we could continue to make progress on that front.
I love that this isn't, from what I'm hearing here, this isn't a, all right, we're marching toward a destination. Okay, we're done. Check the box and we're going to move on. It sounds like this evolving thing. You're iterating over time. You're finding, okay, we've got this in a good place. Let's go to the next thing, because we're continuing to become, as you evolve, right? You're getting better at the different pieces of this over time. How do you incorporate the voice of the employee into this? So it's not just Jane's opinion of what should matter here, because that's all that has value. I know one of the things you're doing is you're trying to weave them into this and make them part of this process. So talk about that piece if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the original plan that we worked on, and then also with this revisited plan, it was important for us to have people from different parts of the organization. We needed a diverse group kind of informing those efforts. And also kind of giving us some input on the things that were more valuable to kind of prioritize more highly. So the way that we've incorporated really is both in having those voices at the front end of the process as we're thinking through what our vision and mission is, and then also kind of sharing with our ERGs to get feedback on things like, for example, we just rolled out a code of conduct last week. And we shared it with ERG leaders well before we shared with the company to make sure that it's actually serving the folks who it's intended to serve. So I think really making sure in this work that you're incorporating different voices. And then also we have our engagement survey, and we also have some anonymous feedback loops where we can get kind of tips on things to focus on or things that are going well or not going well. Really as a measure of accountability, and also to make sure we're focusing on the right things.
That is excellent. One of the things that's been pretty consistent in the conversations that I've had with some forward-thinking companies like Wistia in the last year is plenty of people talk about this. People talk about it like it's important, or like we should get to that at some point after we get these other 27 things done we've just got to work on. And the companies that stand out for me are the ones who said, it's important enough to do it now, not to plan for it in the future or to decide we're eventually going to do this, but we're going to do this now, even if it's not a, right, like I said, it's not a one stop, we're done. But taking small steps over time is really the goal there. And it's so much fun to hear you talk about that, as you talked about. Start with hiring. Obviously, let's get a diverse set of individuals in the business so we can start incorporating their ideas and their feedback and the things they bring. Then you talked about pay equity, because that also is another kind of a key lever. Anything else that you've thought about as kind of this long term? Not, don't want to commit you to anything, but just long term. Like I would imagine, like career mobility might be part of that, or how we're developing people, or the feedback we're giving individuals and recognition. Like all those kind of things probably factor in. But I don't know anything else on your agenda in terms of tackling.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned kind of folks feeling a little bit reluctant to get started, or it can feel overwhelming, because the truth is, this is not a project that you can be done with. You're never going to be done, and that can feel really overwhelming. And it's actually the reason why we decided to kind of create and produce this podcast. Is it's helpful when you see what other companies are doing, so you can kind of understand what you can do, some interesting like little things you can start to do if you don't have the size team to really do big initiatives. And so we wanted to make it a little bit more accessible for CEOs, for HR leaders to get started regardless of where they are in kind of their company growth cycle. And there's a lot of work we still need to do. I think we need to, and have started to try and build our own racial literacy in the company, so that folks are kind of understanding of the ways in which their own privilege has kind of impacted their career or negatively impacted some of their peers. I think we do need to focus more on growth and investment in growth of different populations within Wistia. I think there's a lot to be said for us continuing to invest in our culture where people can bring their authentic selves to work. We get great feedback, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily where we want to be. And I think all of these other things that you do, absent that really inclusive culture with people who are understanding of one another and willing to meet one another where they are, that's all kind of for naught. You can bring folks in the door, you can have all of these great systems, but if your culture is not ripe for inclusivity, you know, all of it is kind of, I won't say wasted effort, but you're not going to get the value out of it. So I think continuing to invest there is a focus of ours.
Walking someone up to a door that's locked and saying, "There you go, good luck." Like there's no way for them to break through that on their own. We've got to give them we've got to provide the right framework, the right tools, the right processes, all those kind of things around it to make that work. Excellent. Well, I'm going to make sure to put that link in the podcast in the notes right now. So in the comments there, A Better Workplace, Jane, and who's your co-host on that again, Jane?
Colin, he is one of the DE&I task force members, and he's fantastic on it.
Excellent. So make sure you check the podcast out there, give them some listens, because Jane is doing good work there, and she is continuing to produce episodes, trying to help tackle that. Not just, again, for their own team internally, they could do this and produce it and put it inside their walls, and no one could ever see it. But they're doing this to share with the community so that all of us can learn and grow alongside each other. So I appreciate that. One thing I want to ask you about is something, again, we were chatting about before we started recording. In the last year, more and more HR leaders that I've talked to have said, like, this is more than I thought I was buying in for when I stepped into this role, when I fell into HR, whatever the case may be. And I want to ask you about burnout a little bit, just because, again, this is something that I keep hearing over and over again. And the world was very different last year. We ran summer school in June. We were just starting to see some of the impacts and some of the changes, and things were kind of up in the air for a lot of us. And so I'd love for you to talk about this idea of burnout as it relates to HR, because again, the great thing and the terrible thing about all of us, and I'm looking at every one of you out there who's sitting in the comments and listening in, like, we're the first ones to say, "Oh, something else, I'll just put that on me. Right? I'll put that on our team, and so it doesn't inconvenience someone else." And there's a limit to how often you could do that. So I'll stop talking. I'll keep commenting on it and never let you get around to it. So take a minute, Jane, talk about that.
Yeah, I think the last year has been the most difficult year to navigate for me professionally. I think, first off, many of us get into this career because we are wired to want to make things better for other people. And so a lot of us naturally want to give and make other people's lives easier, simpler, better. And so, you know, first with COVID, I think all of us in leader roles in the HR profession are thinking, how do we keep the team safe? How do we keep them educated? How do we also put on our business hat and try to make this new way of working work for the business? Because we still need to exist. We don't want to be laying people off. And so you're facing all these like new puzzles to solve that you are going through individually, but you're also needing to solve for the whole company while you're also trying to take care of people. And that was, you know, I think, yeah, February and March of last year, I can't say that they were the best months of my life professionally. I was completely burnt out because this was, you know, uncharted territory. There was no playbook for the whole world kind of shutting down and how to operate a business under that and how to shepherd people through it, how to deal with kind of the real new demands on people that, you know, productivity is not going to be the same. That's got to be something you're okay with. And then also, as we kind of moved into the summer and there's this new lens and awareness of kind of racial injustice out there, I think many companies turned to HR leaders to think about, okay, what is our voice on this? What do we need to be doing differently? Where do we need to invest? And, you know, all of that there aren't companies that are doing this perfectly. So again, you can't, even the best companies have their issues and there's not a standard playbook. So again, you have people professionally in uncharted territory with this big spotlight on kind of the function and figuring out what's next. So I think it was a lot. And I want to call out that burnout in this function is a real risk and something that I've kind of grappled with at various times this year, because you're trying to take care of everybody else. And it's really hard to find the time and space to say, I just can't help you with this thing, or I can't solve this issue for you because I'm just toast. So I guess my advice is, I think folks having someone to check in with or who knows you really well is helpful. And I think for me, as we've kind of had this prolonged state, just making sure that I was taking time for myself regularly every few months. And it needed to not be a day or two. It needed to be a week where I could unplug, relax. Because if I didn't do that, I didn't have anything to give to people, or I was short with them, or instead of going with kind of like a curiosity into any issues to find the best solution, I was much more likely to kind of default to what had worked in the past. And that's not always the best way to be a partner in our function. So I think it's really just important for folks to have that some sort of check and be really diligent about taking time off, because I think I said this to you as we started chatting about this. None of us got into HR to be the caricature of like the angry HR person. And if you don't take care of yourself, like that's what happens. If you don't step away to kind of feel why you really enjoy your job and all of the great things that you can do, it's easy to become short with people or feel like you're hearing the same issues over and over again. And I've just had to be deliberate about finding time, and not just, it needs to be an extended step away if you have the luxury to do that.
I'll write down a couple things you're saying there, right? Intentional time where you set something aside. I'll tell you, like you realize that you had the self-awareness to realize, you got to overheat if I don't cool off a little bit. The way it presents for me is I love podcasts and everything else, but occasionally I need a time where there's no input at all and I just have some silence. And usually that will come in the form of a run or something like that, where I just kind of get outside. And last year I had a knee injury and could not run. And I realized about a month or so into that those times where I would just unplug from everything for a little bit, I wasn't having those moments day to day, and it was starting to build up. And one of those symptoms that you pointed out, I didn't even realize until you started saying them, like, yes, I'm like checking them, like terrible side effects on taking some poor medication over there. And so I'm absolutely with you on that. I would encourage everybody listening in, again, as she said, find someone you can check in with, that can hold you accountable, not in a, hanging over your head, but someone that's a friendly voice that you can just say, hey, let's talk about something besides work for a little bit, right? Let's have some fun together. Tell me a story, make me laugh. Like I do that for a good friend of mine all the time, and one of the other speakers here for summer school, because we both have kind of hard charging jobs, and we stop and laugh together for a while, because that's what refreshes us. So find that thing that rejuvenates you, whatever it may be. Jane, I'm going to actually ask you, what's the thing that after you do it, you feel refreshed? Is it time away, or is there something else that applies there?
Yeah, I really enjoy just kind of doing a random day trip to somewhere in New England with a hike. And so that was the other thing that was tough, is like that disappeared because, we were all supposed to kind of isolate. But I do like being outside, and I need to be somewhere quiet. That recharges this little introvert.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I know we're getting close on our time, so I just want to say thank you again. Again, the podcast, The Better Workplace, from the team over at Wistia. I'll make sure the link is in the comments again, so you can check that out. Thank you so much, Jane, for spending time with us, for sharing. You and I haven't had a chance to talk in a very long time, and I appreciate you being willing to come on and share some of your wisdom, some of your passion for our space with the team here at HR Summer School. I know they appreciate it too.
Thanks so much for having me. I love talking shop. So
Awesome. Everybody else, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll have another session for you coming right. We actually will be wrapping up the day coming right up. So really quickly, I just wanted to say, as we're closing up for the day, thank you again to our sponsors for helping out. Make sure you tag them in the comments. Just let them know we appreciate them. We'll be hearing from many of them this week as we go through. We'll have things to give you from many of them this week. And so it's just going to be a ton of fun. And I appreciate all of them for making this available for you and making the experience possible for all of us to get together and have some fun and just kind of clearing the way, paving the way for us. Tomorrow's agenda, really quick, just to give you some quick preview in the last 2 or 3 minutes here we have together. We'll start off the same, actually. For those of you that loved seeing Greg and George together, they're going to do it again for us tomorrow. I think tomorrow George is going to take point and kind of interview Greg a little bit, so kind of changing the position a little bit, but they're going to have some fun with it. I have no clue what they're going to do. I had no clue what they're going to do today, and then look what we saw. Next up, we're going to hear from Julia on how to build performance processes that are equitable, weaving that equity piece into how we manage performance. I think it's going to be a great set of insights, and she gives us some really practical and powerful takeaways. Not just encouragement there to go do that, figure it out, but here's the tools you need to make that happen. Very practical. I love it. Christopher Lind has become an amazing friend in the last year. I love and appreciate him. His wife's expecting child number 6, so we'll give him a kudos for that tomorrow. And our pat on the back. He's going to talk about remote and hybrid work. A piece came out in HBR recently and I wrote about it on LinkedIn. You might have seen it, that said that managers should tell women when to come back to work, and for their own good is kind of the slant on that. So he and I are going to talk about that as husbands, as fathers, as leaders in the workplace, what we see there and what the problem is with that approach. You can probably kind of get an inkling there that I'm getting fired up already just talking about it. We'll take a break. We'll have another Where Are They Now story. Dr. David Arrington is going to come back to us. He was here last year with us. Just an amazing leader. He's going to talk to us about leading yourself and leading the function. It's going to be really great. Roger Kitchen is going to give us some insights on how to build mental performance. We heard about burnout and things today. We'll get some tools tomorrow from Roger on how to think through that and how to tackle that. And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Wendy. There's a great initiative going on right now supporting the veteran community, helping to enable HR leaders to be kind of trained on how to hire veterans and how to bring them in. And again, just like the fair chance we used to talk about today, more and more companies are struggling with the hiring side. So we try to weave in some specific things to make that more helpful, more specific for you as we go through. So I've had a tremendous amount of time with you today. It's been so much fun. I appreciate every one of you for hanging out with us. Please, as I mentioned earlier, number one, come back tomorrow. You will not regret it. Come back the next day too. Goodness, don't just skip out on one day. If you enjoyed today at all, post a review on LinkedIn. I'll have the team be going through tonight. Tag HR Summer School so I make sure and see that. I don't want to miss it. I'm going to try to make sure and capture some of those, and we'll pick some winners for prizes tomorrow out of that. I told you we're going to give away 100 prizes in the next couple of days. We've probably already given away maybe 20 or so in the context so far. So post that. If you're part of a Facebook group for HR, go and tell them about the amazing experience you had today and tell them to come back tomorrow, right? Just have some fun with it. If it's valuable for you, spread the word. I appreciate every one of you again for being here. The work you're doing is valuable. You're bringing real value to the community, to your organization, and I can't wait to join you tomorrow as we learn alongside each other. It's going to be tremendous. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.